Okay, this is one continuing meeting, and we've recessed it a number of times, and so I need a mover and a seconder to reconvene. Hannah Coughlin, all those in favor? Carried. And I'm going to ask our Director of Finance, Mr. Schmidt, to come forward and kind of bring us up to date, because we've kind of shifted some things around and we have some additional information. So he'll get us on track before we start moving into. And the first matter on tonight's agenda is the library. They're back with some revised information. So with that, Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and ladies and gentlemen, and senior staff. As the Mayor mentioned, today we continue our conversation about the 2018 budget. However, before I pass things over to our friends at the library, I just wanted to provide an overview of some changes that have happened since we last met last Wednesday, and just to walk members of council through some of the handouts that you see in front of you. So you should see 2 pages essentially that outline the impact, or the revised impact, on the average residential property owner. That is in relation to the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund increase. So the 2 slides that you'll see in front of you on your table, that again reflects where the township currently is at. And just quickly, the township's portion with no program changes, we're looking at a $20.68 increase on an average assessed home at $422,584, or 1.43% increase. Blended meaning when we take into account the county and the education portion as well as policing, we're looking at roughly a $43.62 increase, or 1.19% increase. When we factor in all of the program changes, again for a average residential house assessed at $422,584, township's portion is $52.68, or 3.64% increase. And again, from a blended perspective, it's $75.62 increase, or 2.06% increase. In addition to those 2 slides, you'll also have 3 other pages, which essentially is updates to your budget binder to reflect the changes that I just spoke of. And then you also should have a revised presentation deck, slide deck that we'll be walking through after we hear from our friends at the library. So unless there's some questions on that information.
Yeah, I think Councillor Austin has a question.
I'm just wondering which documents you were looking at. I was trying to follow your figures and I couldn't find which of the documents you were looking at.
Sure. So the first, sorry.
Carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Austin. Essentially, it's the first 2 pages with the impact on the average residential property.
For the sake of the audience, might we have that up on the screen? Or are you finished?
Dr. Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Austin, we don't actually have that available, but we can bring that back when we meet at our December 6th and our December 8th meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions of Director Schmidt for the moment, or shall we have the library come forward? Okay. Please.
So, thank you for having us back again. I'm just going to go over very quickly some of the additional information that was requested and that I have provided here in the appendix for you. One of the questions that we were asked last Monday was about a partnership with Barrie. I was able to speak with Mark Sanders, the Barrie CEO, last week, and they have a strict policy about a reciprocal agreement with their neighboring libraries. And their policy states that, so I'm getting ahead of myself actually. So we have several options: the reciprocal agreement with Barrie, fee for service with Barrie, use contract personnel for added hours, and then of course approve our ask of increased open hours for 28 hours, which means 28 staffing hours for a total of 18 actual open hours across all 3 branches. So our partnership with Barrie Public Library. Oh, sure.
So you didn't talk about the pay per resident,
This is just an overview I will be getting.
so we're not talking about the bullets on this slide then?
This is just my table of contents.
Oh, sorry.
Um,
Thought it was there.
So, our partnership with Barrie Public Library, they have a very strict policy in regards to reciprocal agreements. And they are funded at, I'm not sure the exact per capita, but they want all reciprocal libraries to be funded at least 75% per capita of what their budget is. For us, that would mean our budget would need to be funded at approximately $820,000 per capita per resident. Last year, or 2017, Barrie was 55, and when you look at our budget per resident, was $32.57. So we are way under the 75% of Barrie. And we would need approximately $820,000, and they asked to all reciprocal libraries to show stable funding of at least 3 years. And then if your funding does drop while you have the reciprocal agreement, they will end the reciprocal agreement with us. So right now, that is not an option. If we increase our budget proportionally over the next 3 years, by 2020, it may be an option.
Councillor Austin?
Second last bullet, our budget would need to be approximately $820,000 to meet Barry's. By that, do you mean that if we had no library at all in Springwater Township, and we had an arrangement with Barrie Public Library, it would cost the township over $800,000? Is that what you're saying?
No, this is for the reciprocal agreement that we have full borrowing privileges in their two libraries, and they have full borrowing privileges in our 3 branches. The fee for service is the next issue that's coming up, but I don't think a 60% increase in our base library budget would be palatable to this council or to our residents.
Okay.
To be very honest, I'm still not sure how you got there, and so maybe you can explain. It's nice to throw a number out, 820,000, but what does that derive from?
If, right now, our per capita budget is $32.57. Barry's has gone up $2 from last year to this year. Ours has gone up almost $7, $6.50. However, it would need to increase so that the library budget would be a minimum of $820,000 to get us into that ballpark of the per capita spending.
Okay, you're still going to have to give me the equation.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Our budget, at full ask of $761,155 is 70% of the Barrie Public Library budget right now. Their budget is approximately $8.1 million. And so per capita, that would be 70%, because obviously Barrie has more residents than us, so looking at 761,000 to 800, 8.1 million is apples and oranges. So when you look at it per capita by resident, the full ask of 761,000 is actually 70% of their $57 per capita.
So I still don't think you got there for me, and I understand math pretty well. So maybe I'll ask a question and have other people ask further questions. So your 700 and some thousand that, when you say per capita, is that every man, woman, and child?
Yes.
So even though a lot of people do not participate, they do it on a general basis, and so you're saying their budget at the present time in 2018 is $57 per every child, adult, and senior?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And so you're saying in Springwater, okay, right now, so you can do the 75% of the 57 times, what did you use, 18,500, or did you just use the kind of southern area, what did you use as the population to come to your 820,000?
I actually, to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, I actually used the 2016 census figure of 19,000 residents and 100, I believe it is. I didn't have the exact numbers for 2017, so that was the one that was the most accurate.
Okay, any other, Councillor Austin?
So, as I understand this, that Barrie spends $50, budget's $57 per person. And we spend budget $39 per person, or projected. If we spent $50 per person, then our budget would be $820,000. Is that what you're saying? So we're spending less per person than Barrie is right now. Okay, I get that.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. Ladies, thank you for the information. I do find it a little bit confusing, but I'm sure I'm the only one. My question to you is, we often compared spring water, or it gets compared to Ormodonte. And my understanding is Ormodonte has no library, and they contract their library service to Barrie and I believe Aurelia. Would you be able to tell me how much they pay Barrie for Ormodonte residents to be able to use their library?
Through
Carry
you,
on.
through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hanna, I don't know the exact figure. I know it is, I'm going to guess approximately 110,000. Mr. Saunders gave me a number. I'm not sure. I didn't write that down, so do not trust my memory on that one, please. Also, Oromodonte pays Aurelia, Severn, Township of Severn for Coldwater, as well as Midland. So I'm not sure how much they pay those other partner libraries as well, but if they have to pay for libraries, I'm sure it would add up greatly for them.
Okay, thank you. And so the way I understand this, if a resident from Springwater to be a member at a Barrie library, would they still have to pay for a library card under your scenario here? Or would this be just a free service they get from Barrie?
Carry
Through
on.
you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hanna, if we had a reciprocal agreement with them, and we would have to, hopefully in 2020, we might be at that point where they would accept it, that would mean a Springwater resident could walk into Barrie Library, show their library card, and receive all the services as Barrie residents. Barrie residents could conversely walk into Springwater Library, show their library card, and receive all the benefits. We currently have the agreement of that sort with Essa Township, and we just have to sign the paper. The Clearview Library Board approved the reciprocal agreement with us as well. So our residents will be able to do that with the townships of Clearview and Essa. So we are trying to expand services for the area, the residents in our southwest corner especially, that are closer to probably Angus. If they are to, right now, our residents pay $75 for a library card if they wish to go to Barrie, and then they can use all of the Barrie Public Library services. In speaking with the CEO of Barrie, he was not interested in this fee-for-service agreement that they had with Oromodonte. He did not see any benefit with it from Springwater. Also, the amount of staff time that he would have to do, the Oromodonte one does take up a lot of staff time on the Barrie end, just as the Tiny Township one takes up some staff time on our Springwater end, so we can serve the residents of Tiny, and they pay for that service to come to our Springwater branches. So he said flat out, due to the amount of time it would take compared to the population that would use it and the amount of money they would probably be able to get from that, he would not recommend it to the library board at all. It would not benefit Barrie as he would hope.
Thank you. That was a long answer to my short question. So my question I wanted to confirm with you was that there are people in Springwater, residents, who do have library cards, and they go and use the Barrie Library because it's central to them, or their education level, they need some special books at the Barrie Library. I understand it's $75 for adult and $25 for children. Could you please just confirm that without going to a long answer?
Carry on.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is the case.
Any other questions? Councillor Hanna just begged another question for me then. So the 820 tell me if my math is correct. So we use the 19,100, and 75% of the 57 is 4275. Is that what you used as a number, give or take?
Yes.
Okay, and that's how you got the 820,000. That makes sense. But then this gentleman just threw some fly in the ointment. They all, not every kind of person is an adult, so does that impact it at all, or is it just across the board per capita you're suggesting? Because the 820 makes sense, but if we kind of divided the library memberships, it would probably be a lower number.
Basically, with arrangements with another municipality, because libraries are municipally based, there are three types of arrangements. One is the reciprocal, so that it doesn't matter whether you're in Springwater or Barrie, but that's the one that would cost us $820,000 a year for at least 3 years before we'd even be eligible to apply for it. The other one is a situation like Oromadonte, Agilitas Oroncio, and Tiny Township have, where there's an agreement between the municipalities that there will be a fee for service. It's not necessarily the $75. I believe our arrangement with Tiny is for $80 per household. But those residents of Tiny Township, for example, who take advantage of that fee for service, fill out a form, our staff compile the forms, send it off to the Tiny Township staff, and then we get reimbursed for the number of people that have signed the papers. That type of fee for service arrangement is the one that Jody just outlined to you that Barrie isn't interested in. So the third one is for individuals on a completely independent use of their own financial resources to walk into the Barrie Public Library, say, I'm a resident of Leftover Shoe, Ontario, give me a Barrie Library card, and they'll say, thank you very much, $75. So the three levels are reciprocal, so it's seamless, a fee for service where our residents would have to fill out a form and get reimbursed, and that's what Barrie isn't interested in doing. And the third one is an independent per user basis, and it's an annual fee.
Okay, Councillor McConkey?
So is there a fee associated to being the reciprocal with ESSA? Because I do not see the benefit to ESSA having us, because Midhurst and Minising is a lot further than, like, for me to go to Angus.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is no fee for ESSA or Clearview. Those townships are, I'll say, apples to apples with Springwater. They're much more comparable in terms of demographics. And so our budgets still aren't quite aligned, but we have similar program services. Yes, we may have the advantage of ESSA. Please don't tell them that. And we do have several members of ESSA, particularly those ones that work in Barrie's North End. And then they can come in, and especially if they're traveling on the 26 corridor. We have signed a few up in our Midhurst branch especially. We've also had some ESSA people take part in some of our programs when we have special programs like our Harry Potter or Star Wars Trivia Nights that ESSA isn't doing at that time. And we foresee the same thing with Clearview. It's a lot more even with the Clearview and the ESSA reciprocal agreements, and there's no fees involved in that.
Okay, shall we move on? Okay, please.
So, our budget ask was, our program change was $46,426 for 28 additional staff hours. And this is to open Elmville, Midhurst 5 extra hours per week, dependent on, of course, funding and board approval of the suggested hours. And then Minising 8 hours how we got the hours was looking at our survey that we did at the Midhurst Autumn Fest and the Elmville Fall Fair and asking what our residents wanted. It requires 2 part-time staff, approximately 14 hours each, depending on how the hours fall out. And it reduces our service gaps that we have, because right now we're closed from 3 o'clock on Saturday until 10 a.m. on Tuesday at both Elmville and Midhurst, and 5 o'clock on Friday until 1 p.m. on Tuesday at Minising, which is not adequate service, accessible access to resources at all for our residents. So here is an example of what we are proposing. Like I said, this is dependent on funding and, of course, board approval. We actually, when we first proposed this, we were looking at the Sunday hours, and we were really surprised when the survey came back and said, no, people want Monday hours. And so we changed it a little bit. So Monday, we're proposed to open 1 to 5 at Elmville and Midhurst. That would require 2 staff on at those locations. So those would be 20 extra hours, or 20 hours there, or sorry, 16 hours there, excuse my math. We would extend the hours on Tuesday in Minising, so opening in the morning, which would help with the new families there. We have a lot of stay-at-home moms there who bring their children in on the Friday mornings. It would give them extra access on the Tuesday mornings. Add an extra day in Minising, so they have greater access, which they've been asking for an extra day. And our survey did say the most popular days in Minising were Tuesday through Friday. Extend Thursday evenings, which would help those commuters that work in Barrie or farther south, as many of those new families moving into that area of our township are. So they have an extra evening to come into Minising. And then to help make up the hours, we would actually open 1 hour later on the Friday in Minising. We had it open at 9 because of the school hours with families coming in after dropping off their older ones at school. But we would put it more in line with the other 2 branches and use that hour to help extend the hour on Thursday. And then open 1 hour later on the Saturday at both Elmville and Midhurst. So that's what is suggested. The library board would have to approve it.
Okay, questions? Councillor Austin.
I'm curious as to why you didn't consider being open, like, on Saturday in Minising, say, take some of the hours that you've added in red during the week and offer to be open for part-time on Saturdays when the children are out of school and parents are not working.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Austin, we have actually had a couple of pilot projects on Saturday. We did one in the summer of 2016, and we didn't have as many people as we had hoped. We also apparently did one several years back before I arrived over the winter hours. And in the survey, they did say there was a few requests for Saturday, but the majority of the requests were for Tuesday through Friday. And if the survey had said Saturday over Friday, we would have added the Saturday hours instead.
Deputy Mayor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor French. Using that chart, can you go through with us what the 20% increase without the program changes, but in the budget, the 20% increase in salaries that I believe you say take us to the level of service that existed at the start of this term?
Primarily, those hours would be additional staff in the mornings at Midhurst and Elmville, which is where we're running short. That's our bulk of our heavy user time with our variety of young users, so that we need to have the person cover off there. We also will have, as I mentioned to you over the weekend in prior conversation, that we have some additional constraints with our banking that will arise in May, so that that would be something that the CEO would work out with the staff members as to when best to add those hours.
So to clarify then, the 20% increase in the base budget before the 46,426 special request would be no extra hours than the black hours showing up there. It would just be extra staffing?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Anna?
Thank you. I'm really trying to help you, ladies, so you've got to help me to make a financial decision, not political, financial decision. So I'm looking at this, and as I explained the other day, so let me ask you this question first. When you explained the other day, you stated that you couldn't open later because the young people who attended at 10 in the morning need an afternoon nap. So how old are those people that we're catering to at 10 o'clock in the morning?
I'll let you just respond to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hannah. We actually have all ages in at 10 a.m. I don't have a count of, we don't stand there and count, unfortunately, who comes in at, who's 1 year old and who comes in at 60. We have very few school-age children in between 10 and 3:30, except at the Minising branch, because we do get children at the Minising branch for their nutrition breaks, because they're right next to the school. So if they have a pass, they're allowed to come over for the 20 minutes and check out books and read the magazines. Anecdotally, I've been in Minising at Midhurst, for example. I know that's a library in your ward, so I will talk to that one. And we have a lot of all ages. We have a lot of seniors who prefer to come out during the day, obviously, because especially at this time, they don't want to drive when it gets dark. And I would love to open later as well. I really would. That's not in this budget request because we don't have the money to open all the hours that I would love and to put us into par with some of the other neighboring systems like Clearview. But we do have on Tuesdays in Elmville, we have our library babes. And on Tuesday in Midhurst, we have our story time. So those days are heavily geared towards the younger ones, the babies, toddlers, and preschoolers. Wednesday, we don't have any children's programs, and we actually have a movie in Elmville at 11 o'clock that is geared towards adults and seniors. So we get a lot more seniors in Wednesdays, especially in the mornings. Thursday, it's in Midhurst, it's a mix. In Elmville, because we have a story time program, we get the children because of the program. And in Friday, it's our only morning, so it really is a mix, although we do get, that's our only mornings, that's the only day we can have for our program. I hope that helps.
Okay, so thank you for the detailed response.
I know.
My question, I'm trying to lead up to the fact that I support the need to open later, and I've done this for a number of years when you've come forward and the other library people have come forward. My question is, in the past, we've always said, instead of giving you more money to open earlier, when you used to open at 11, open later. And as I mentioned last time you were here, we were told there was no need to open later. Now we're hearing there is a need to open later, and I believe there is, and there has been in the past, but the decision was to open earlier. So my question is, some of these decisions might have been made before the government of the day bought in full-time junior kindergarten. Junior kindergarten, as you know, starts at age 4. Currently, there's a thing on the website telling parents that if you have a child turning 4 in 2018, register them in January of 2018. So that means to me that the people coming that are preschoolers are 3 years old. I can't see 3-year-old, on all due respect, needing to come to the library because I'm not sure how many of them could actually read in any detail. So if it's just story time, I know in the past, for example, in Midhurst, they ran a parents group where the parents rented the 2 different churches or used the 2 different churches. The parents came and read stories, whatever they did with the children, let them play and share their diseases and whatever else they do at that age. So I guess my point being is, as much as this would be great to stay open at 10, it doesn't make good financial responsibilities from my point of view to be opening at 10 when you should be opening maybe at 11 and then adding the time on at the end. Like I say, I'm trying to help you, but I just can't see the justification from a financial point of view to be opening at 10 to read books to preschoolers at age 3.
Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Actually, it's not just reading books. We have many, many pre-literacy activities. So for our story time, and you make the really good point about junior kindergarten starting so much earlier, which actually means there's even more need for children to come into a library and into a social setting so they're prepared to go into JK. Our storytime person now actually has a massive library science and children's literature, and she's able to incorporate all these wonderful activities. So it's not just reading a book, we do read books and increase their attention span, improves their vocabulary, their pre-literacy skills. In learning to read, there's so much more than to just sit and reading the book. It's to interact with the book, interact with print, sing your ABCs, all the nursery rhymes. There's studies been done for babies that if you read to them and do the nursery rhymes, they are that much more able and ready to pick up the actual phonics and decoding skills that we need when we get to later skills for learning how to read. So at the library, we incorporate all of that into reading time. We have passive programming, which is activities out for the children. We do have playgroups for the mothers. That's what we've instituted in Minising, because that's what our parents asked for there. They wanted the time to come and to socialize more than actually do these pre-reading activities. So it's so much more than just a plain boring story time. There's songs, there's rhymes, there's meeting kids, there's sharing a little bit of germs. We wipe everything down really, really well. And it's just a really great resource for these families to have to prepare their children for when they go into JK. And it starts at birth.
And additionally, our libraries are centers for the Ontario Early Years program, because we don't have the community facilities for them. So they are responsive both to the needs of the parents who bring the children and to those parents' requests for what the children need. So that's an outside agency that uses our facilities in the morning.
I guess my last point I'll try to make is, if you said to me that you'll open at 11 instead of 10, and then you'll add on extra hour at the end, plus you'll ask us for more money to add on an additional extra time at the end of the day, so people who are commuting or on the weekends could use the library, I'd be very supportive. But I have difficulty supporting why you need to open at 10 for preschool children, and you can't do that at 11. And like I say, I'm looking at it from a financial business place, because that's what we have to do when we're doing the budget, because we have so many financial pressures. And again, I'm sorry, but I just don't understand why you can't open 11, you have to open at 10 for preschoolers. And you don't have to even answer the question, I'm just sharing you my view.
Okay, Jody?
I know this could go on forever. I just want to make one small point. It's also not just for preschoolers. For example, in Elmville, the senior population that is retired is very active on the street in the morning. They go do their coffee time, and then they are ready to go use facilities actually at 9 a.m. And some of them have been upset that we're not open at 9 a.m. for them, because they want to have their coffee at 8:30, get their book, go to the drugstore, and go home. So we do serve all ages in the mornings.
Okay, I'll go to the Deputy Mayor Allen and then to Councillor Coghlan.
So just circling back, I just want to make sure I understood your answer before. The base budget has a $89,000 increase between salaries and benefits, so that's 20% increase, 18 over 17. My understanding is that consists of compensation review, cost of living, and increase in group benefits. There's no additional staffing. Is that correct? So the additional staffing that we're talking about here is only related to the 46,426 program change request.
The base budget request is for an additional 30 hours of staff time. And that will allow us to maintain the levels of service that we had at the beginning of this term of this council. Our program change request is for the
Yeah, actually, Donna, maybe
hours.
let's stick with the kind of the
Okay.
change in the base budget,
Okay,
because I think the kind of enhancements are pretty clear. So maybe come back to that point.
So the changes so what you're saying is that it's just more staff, but no extra hours, but increasing the service level back to what
Yes.
it was. And that's more staff during the existing, can you flip back to that chart,
Yes.
please?
Okay.
That's more staff in the hours in black.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you. I obviously fully support this, and I do believe that having the libraries open in the morning is an essential part to building a community. I know that there are lots of young moms who that extra hour in the morning, the difference between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m., it fluctuates your entire day. And while, yes, there is information out there that will show you that kids are going to school earlier, that just means we have to prepare them for school earlier. So now we have 3-year-olds needing to be prepared. But when you have a 3-year-old at home, you may also have a 6-month-old at home. So you have to work around 2 schedules. So it's not just suggesting that it's just for that 3-year-old. And I would actually argue that, for myself anyway, it was more for me. Like having the kids there, I do have books at home. I brought the children up learning. But to be there and be around other moms and create that sense of community with my children, it was done through the libraries in Springwater. So I would fully support keeping our libraries open in the morning and having them open for the older families and the commuters. But to take something away from one population to give it to another is not the goal of this council. We are trying to create a library that is wholesome and services our entire population, and understanding that the needs of our entire population are different. We need to be open. I would love to have more programming available, but right now our goal is to be open. So I fully support the morning. You take that away and you just take away the entire programming for our young kids. And whatever website it was that proves that kids are going to school early is also going to be the same website that shows you how important literacy is for children at all ages. So whether they're chewing on a book or not, they're learning what it's all about. So that's my comment there.
Councillor Austin, then Councillor McConkey.
Could I ask, thank you, Mayor France, through you to the clerk to begin with, could I ask us to have page 16 brought up on the screen in this presentation, page 16?
That's
So
in the back, right?
we can analyze, we can continually analyzing this presentation and this request, you know, for a long time. To me, it boils down to page 16 and page 17. Page 16, we're talking about the funding per card holder has decreased in the last few years. We have more card holders, and our funding for individual card holders has decreased. Page 17, in comparison to other libraries, and they're very much like our libraries, we are open fewer hours. I believe I'm correct in saying that Barrie spends $57 per person on the and we spend 38 or something. So my point being that we need to catch up. You know, we're well below the I think we're at the 25th percentile, something like that, and our goal should be somewhere in the 50th percentile in terms of how much we spend per citizen on our libraries. It's time for us to catch up. Now, as I said, we could analyze this, you know, much longer, but what I see in front of me is an extremely qualified, extremely dynamic CEO, terrific, dedicated staff, very, very well qualified, and a great library board, also very dedicated and very experienced. And to me, they are the experts, and they're not asking for more than they should. So I am very much in support of the extra $46,000 on top of the base budget you were talking about. And at some point, I would like to make a motion that the majority of that $46,000 be taken from, instead of having our one-day Springwater event, or was it Celebrate Springwater event, which would be a one-day event. I don't know if that's robbing Peter to pay Paul, but I would happily do without a one-day party for all of Springwater in order to benefit so many more people in so much, such a bigger way for such a, you know, the whole year, by taking the money from the Springwater, Celebrate Springwater event and using instead for what the library is asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McConkey.
I just have some qualification questions, and I think it's on the deputies, and he might be able to explain it to me. But basically, I see that the increase up to the base budget is $140,000. And the justification here is basically based on the $46,000, which is the 2 part-time help. or two positions of library technicians, and it's permanent part-time. When I look at that, the justification is they increased hours. So now, if I give you the $46,000, you get your increased hours. Where I don't get it is, where's that, how does it equal 140,000? And it says, due to compensation review, cost of living and COLA. We have that with our staff, and I think it doesn't amount to this, you know, like, if in comparison with the amount of employees, it's not this type of increase. So I would assume the additional staffing hours is what the main increase is, but how much of that increase is the additional staffing hours?
Jody?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor McConkey, if I may continue, we did ask for 30 extra hours, and I know the Deputy Mayor has been very concerned about this as well. And the reason is to maintain our current level of increase. As we all know, the township has been growing. So while the population has been growing, those people have also been coming in the library doors. Our numbers were just under 80,000 people inside our doors before Halloween, with a 27% increase in program attendance. And our circulation has also increased, as have our interlibrary loans. So you've already seen all those numbers. And so our staff is stretched thin. They're at a breaking point. And so that's why we asked for 30 extra hours, which is $50,000 increase in our base budget. And if we look at the Ontario Public Library guidelines, this is what we're looking at for trying to determine our actual staffing levels based on those numbers. And so for our population, we should have 8.5 full-time equivalent. So when you add up our full-time positions plus our part-time positions, we should, and then divide them by our 35-hour work week, we should equal 8.5. Right now, we equal 6.2, which is what puts us into underneath the 25th percentile, as Councillor Austin has already mentioned. So with these 30 hours that we asked for in our base budget, that would bring us up to 7.06. And with our extended open hours, which still wouldn't bring us completely in line with some of our surrounding townships, that would bring us up to 7.86, which is a much more viable number and allows us to maintain service, because right now with our staff at the breaking point, our interlibrary loan service is going to take longer. And we do need to keep that at a certain level and standard in order to be part of the interlibrary loan network. Our customer service, people are waiting longer and longer. We're not getting the new books on the shelf. We're going to have to put limits on programs, because when we have 67 people come in for a movie, we don't have the staff to take care of that at the moment. When we have 20 people come in for a craft, and we have a person who has to also run back and forth to the circulation desk and answer the phone, we're leaving the craft unattended. And so we will have to start instituting cutoffs for some of these programs in order to make it safe and enjoyable for our participants. So these are some of these other pressures due to the things we're seeing right now, the interlibrary loans, our cataloging processing. Of course, Elmville adds a different dynamic with some programs happening downstairs. That takes one person away from the main desk as well. So this is what we asked for that. 30 hours extra just to maintain what we're doing now, so we do not let our service slip. Because otherwise, we will have to put the caps on programs. We will take longer for interlibrary loans and processing, and there will be wait times on desks. And right now, we're really well respected in the community for our customer service. People come in, we know their name. We don't want to let that go. So we're asking for the 2 part-time staff, 15 hours each, to cover Elmville and Midhurst. Those are the hours we have there, and these are based on the needs of each branch. So Midhurst, with their story times, we need the person in the morning to cover while my story time person is traveling. The reason my story time person is out of branch, it's a greater efficiency for one person to do all the planning, and it makes greater consistency for the young ones in our township if they're getting these really highly qualified early literacy story times at all the branches. So that is actually, the travel time there is actually less time than we would have if we had 3 different people doing the programming. So that is what we use for our efficiencies there, but it means we are short on the desk. Elmville, we are actually busier in Elmville most days after when the school lets out. And that's when we do a lot of our after-school programs, and that's when we need the extra help and all the technical services come out of Elmville, so we need the extra help for there. So hence these 30 hours, just so we can keep doing what we are already doing and do it well.
Do you have any comments? Okay, Councillor Hanna, and then I.
Thank you, and I'm sorry, my position is not from political. I'm trying to look at it from financial responsibility. The library budget is like $750,000, and you're asking for another $140,000, which is about a 1.35, 1.4% tax increase on taxpayers. And that's why I'm trying to see if there's anything we can do here to try to help you, but not have such a financial impact on our taxpayers. So thank you.
Thank you. No, it's a very good point. Deputy Mayor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor French. I appreciate the extra analysis and numbers you've done on this. Originally, I was only going to be supportive of the base budget increase and not the extra hours. But I think over the last 2 years that we've looked at budgets, we have cut back your increases. And I think this is a time to play catch-up, to get closer to the standard. So I will support the increase, and I think we have to find efficiencies in other areas. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McConkey?
I'm hearing your case here tonight. I guess the thing that I go to is the library master plan that was worked on and hasn't really come forward to council. Like with some of our other plans, the recreation master plan, we're actually going through item by item and saying, yes, we agree or we don't agree. And I think this is maybe influx you're getting from council, because we've received that master plan or that future direction, but we've never bought into where we're heading and what we're doing. And I think if I could see something from next year where we try to evolve and determine through this plan, where are we going? I think we need to have those sit-downs and that education together. And I also think with Minising, it's great to extend the hours because I know it's a busy one. But I know going back from the plan, it said it wants to be a satellite office. So how do we transcend if we're giving them we start to build it up and we make it more robust, and then we're going to pull away. So that's my only concern, like you're going to heartbreak somebody. And so I think we have to start to look at the master plan. And I don't know how you feel you're growing. Like maybe next year you're going to come back with the same thing. I don't think council would approve such a thing next year. So, we've lagged behind. You've stepped up to the plate, got some more things, but I'm not hearing from this also. I've got a whole pile of new residents that don't really even know about the library. So I think that there has to be sort of time to communicate to the residents out there to get the new residents and the households together, because I know that we're going through a welcome wagon package for the new residents, and I know you'll have to be a strong part of that. And I'd like to see those numbers really increase next year, knowing the development that I've had in my community.
Thank you. Okay,
Did you?
I have a quick, you can respond if you like.
Okay, just if you wanted a response. And yes, we have been in limbo since the feasibility study was issued, because it tied into a shared recreation facility. So, quite frankly, I didn't feel that it was worth our efforts to go forward planning a standalone library if, in fact, council approved a joint facility. And then the same going ahead, spending our energies planning a joint facility if, in fact, that wasn't in the end what council wanted and we had to go back to a standalone. So until we're in a bit of a catch-22 situation, waiting for what council wants to do with the recreation plan. But because we can't just stand still, we realize that in the response to this council that we needed to do more outreach. And that's why you have seen us out more in the community at Autumn Fest, at Menacing Mini Fest, at the Fall Fair, at the Maple Syrup Festivals,
The parade
at the
yesterday.
market, at Santa Claus parades. And yes, we do need to bring in more of an awareness of where our libraries were. I had a gentleman this summer ask me where the library was in Elmville when we were at the market. I said, please turn around and look at 11 o'clock. So we need to do that outreach. And we have been mulling over what we do, maybe as a stopgap, but maybe as a permanent solution for the high growth areas. That's why we were so eager to sign the reciprocal agreement with Clearview and Essa Township, because geographically that's where your growth area, and we saw it as a benefit. So yes, we have to work on our future growth plans. Right now, our efforts have been consumed in maintaining the level of service that we have within the constraints of our physical resources, and also being responsive to the needs that our non-users have expressed in becoming users.
Director Schmidt, just a quick question again. What does 1% represent in dollars?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council, it's 108,718, to be exact.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I look at it this way. I like, the information you provided to us, and you've kind of brought it forward. But, just be aware that, it is a 25% increase request. And actually, and again, it's semantics because it's all dollars. I really believe your program changes, I think the numbers are reversed, because adding that staff levels back to at the beginning of this council is really a program change. So really the program changes were closer to 100,000, and the change in the base budget was around 50. My concern is, and for anybody that's listening out there, is it appropriate, being financially responsible, that because of some funding and some people kind of shaving costs off in other areas at the present time, our portion of the tax increased with the revised income in that, before the program changes, would be 1.43. So I'm just telling you, the library would virtually account for 90% of that increase. And so someone has to ask the question, is that appropriate? And that's just the reality. I'm just throwing numbers out. That's all I'm doing. It is effectively, we could say, if we didn't do any other program changes, the library is responsible for any tax increase in the township, from an audit. So I have to throw that out there for you. And I guess the other comment, I do want to follow up, and Councillor McConaughey, we do have an interesting situation with the library, because the library operates on its own under different legislation, and they're the ones that undertake the kind of the study and kind of report back, and they have to provide some guidance and make some decisions. Unlike most of the other money we spend, we're not in total control of it. At the end of the day, we have to open our purse and hopefully fulfill their needs. But anyway, I just throw those out as comments. I'd like to say yes to everything, but at the same time, I'm probably going to have to say no to certain things if I want to be responsible and ensure that we're moving through at an appropriate pace. So we'll just see where the rest of the discussion goes. I'll allow some final comments, and then someone can table a resolution, and we'll go from there. Councillor Coughlin, next.
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to maybe CAO Brindley. When staff is preparing a budget and they dictate what a program change is, so I'm looking at the growth, and then what growth is demanded of this municipality. So when we buy a new snowplow and therefore put a driver in that snowplow and it costs us $100,000, that isn't brought forward to council as a program change. That's just brought forward as part of a base budget or probably our operation costs. So how is it that when staff brings it forward, how do they determine what a program change is versus extended operational costs?
CEO Brindley?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Coghlan. Actually, usually when it comes to a new position, it is a program change. An example, though, is lately we bought a new plow truck, but we were actually down one position for a while. So although we've recently hired a truck driver, that's actually an outstanding hire that we've been doing without for about 1.5 to 2 years. But when it comes to a net new position, it comes as a program change.
Perfect, and thank you.
Councillor McConkey?
Picking up on what the mayor says, optics is that taxpayers are paying this increase in our taxes, and largely due to the library request. Would the library be willing to look at a 0.75 or 1% at the most?
We work with what you give us. I hope that we have made the case that to maintain the level of service that we all experienced when this council first came to term, that we need the 30 extra hours. And the case that in response to growth and to the demands made on our library services, that you honor the request for the program change of the 26 additional hours to have increased service for the population. We never formally fundraised until this term, and we have, and speaking for myself, I would be more than willing to continue on that, but there is only so much that we can fundraise for, that basic services come under the purview of what council allows us. And enhancements, yes, we can fundraise for, but not for the basic programs.
Okay, Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, Mayor French, and thank yous for coming tonight. A nice presentation. I've heard a lot of good things about the library over the last couple of years, what they're doing, and especially from a lot of seniors going in there with their grandkids. Just an array of everybody. So we can beat this all night. I'm going to support this with the amount that you're asking. Thank you.
Okay. I think we've had good discussion, so does someone, okay, I have a mover, moved by Councillor Coghlan and second by Councillor Hanna, that the presentation from the Springwater Public Library regarding the 2018 budget request be received, and that the 2018 library operating budget request in the amount of $599,129 be approved, and that the program change request in the amount of $46,426 be approved and included in the 2018 budget. And just as a reminder, that was tabled at the last meeting, so now it's a resolution. So I'll call the vote. Those in favor?
A recorded vote, please, Mayor
Okay,
French.
recorded vote.
A recorded vote was requested by Councillor Hanna. So when I call your name, if you can say yes or no, please. Councillor Austin,
Yes.
Councillor Coghlan,
Yes?
Councillor Hanna,
No.
Councillor McConkey,
Yes.
Councillor Ritchie,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Allen. Yes. And Mayor French.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank
Thank you.
We
And
hope
thank you
to
for your.
continue to do you
Okay.
proud.
And thank you for the efforts, but, you know, I think it is important, and I understand your challenge as a library, because you operate in what I call a parallel universe, but dependent on our funds. And I think you do need to drill it down more into the granular level, so we really do understand it. Because I know the comment at the last meeting was, well, you know, we at the board, they only wanted us to provide. I think you have to, remember, we're the ones that have to fund it. So you do have to give us as much detail as possible. And this was better, but still some of it was a little confusing. Work out your equations. What does it mean? So we totally understand it. Because yes, we do want to improve our services, but, you know, the reality is, you know, we may have very well ended up with a budget, you know, around 1%. We're not now, definitely, because we're giving you kind of 1.3 or whatever of it. But the reality is we need more information. I do thank you for your efforts and hard work, and I'll parrot what, you know, Councillor Ritchie said, and he brought up a point that wasn't brought up. I mean, there's a lot of grandparents in the Elmville area and that you know, do kind of take their children to the libraries and that, and we have to be aware of it. But it is a very tough thing to say yes to when we're trying to kind of control the costs for our taxpayer. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you'll see on Wednesday our first steps on improving our community relations. So thank you very much.
Okay, good discussion. Now we'll move on to get my Public Works, our next favorite topic. And I guess we'll turn it back to Director Smith. Mr. Chen, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. So the Public Works, the 2018 Public Works budget is, with the revised numbers, is $4,752,877. That is an increase of $169,232, or a cost per $100,000 in residential assessment of $5.33. This is the additional amount over 2017. And through your worship, I will defer to the Director of Public Works to speak about the major initiatives and some of the details about the Public Works budget.
Okay, before we go to Director Coleman, Councillor Austin, you have a question?
I'm just curious as to how the pages are numbered. Where would this fit into the binder? It's page 50, so I just don't know how. Sorry.
Tab 7,
Yeah.
and we have a new spreadsheet. What's the revised numbers?
Okay, all right then.
Carry on.
So in terms of the, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in terms of the drivers of the change of the almost $170,000, the key driver of that amount is going to be additional debt, and that is to complete projects that have already been approved in 2017, as well as the proposed environmental study and drainage engineer fees for works proposed at the Minising wetlands, the Swaley Drain. And then the third driver of that increase is the salaries and benefits, the cost of living assessment, and so forth. There is one program change, an additional $11,859, and that would be for Public Works summer student. And for the major initiatives, and through your worship, I will defer to the Director of Public Works to speak to this.
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to members of council. Our major initiatives for 2018 would be our ongoing road resurfacing and life cycle budgeting. Roads that have been proposed in the last several years in the 6-year capital, as well as ones that have been initiated through the road needs study. We've started and will continue in 2018 the engineering standards updates. As part of the engineering standard update, we'll include some low-impact development standards and narrow those down to what we're willing to accept for future development. We'll continue with the significant developments, mostly Stone Manor and the Midhurst Secondary Plan, as well as a few in Elmvale. We'll continue with our master servicing environmental assessment for the Midhurst area, as that was not completed this year. We'll continue on with the Midhurst Master Stormwater Plan. We have one more meeting before the end of this year. This will also continue into 2018. The Elmvale wastewater lift station, the design has begun in 2017, with construction slated to begin in spring of 2018. And we'll continue on with monitoring the water levels of our Ore Lake Dam. In addition to that, we will continue to support the City of Barrie as they lead our source water protection program. We'll continue on with our one-call management locates, so anything that water and street lights that people call in for locates to Ontario One Call come through our department. What we would like to, as part of the program change I'll get to later, we would like to start with our stormwater management pond inspections and compliance review. Would like to, as you'll see in our next council meeting, you'll have the latest proposed fill bylaw to review. We'd like to finalize that in early 2018. As part of last year's traffic calming policy, it was requested that we come back to council with a finalized plan that will also be in early 2018. The new initiatives, one that was started in 2016, I believe, but hasn't got any traction, is the traffic bylaw update. We're looking, as you're well aware, with growth in Snow Valley. We'll be looking at the Snow Valley Highlands wastewater treatment plant expansion in consultation with the developer. As part of new initiatives and new requirements, we'll be working on our asset management inventory and getting that up to date, and hopefully start to look at the permissive truck bylaw. So the program change that I alluded to is for a Public Works co-op student. We currently own and operate 29 stormwater management ponds. Each pond has an environmental compliance approval, also known as an ECA, which is issued by the MOECC. It explains the construction and operation of the facility. The construction typically is done by the developer. However, once it's assumed, it becomes our responsibility to inspect and maintain. Typically, under the ECA, these are to be inspected once a year. Unfortunately, in my time here, I haven't seen any of them undertaken. So the purpose of this co-op student is to obtain all the ECAs, outline the requirements in these ECAs, track down the drawings, and then inspect and record any work that's required in the ponds, and hopefully to maintain our requirements under the ECA.
Questions? Or CO Brindley, do you want to comment? No, I just saw your hand up. Questions? Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to the Director of Public Works on page 52, I believe, or I have different numbering on mine. That one, major initiatives, so 53 then. Yes. No, 54. Please, thank you. What are the railway assessments?
Director Coleman?
Through you, Mayor French, to Councillor Austin. Sorry, I skipped over that one. The railway assessments were completed in 2016, and at this point, there's nothing to do on our end. We're waiting for CP to review our assessment, and then they'll come back with any requirements that are required, specifically at level crossings, so where the road crosses the train tracks.
Okay. And traffic bylaw, can you remind me what that's about?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Councillor Austin, the traffic bylaw is about the bylaw that basically outlines everything from stop signs to parking to one-way streets that we've discussed in the past. So any sort of bylaw that's required to maintain the road. Speed limits, for example, is another one.
And final question about the co-op student. It's not a high school co-op, is it? Why is it called co-op?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. This would be probably a college-level co-op students. Quite often, the engineering programs at the college level require them to do a co-op, a work placement.
Okay, I know we had a co-op student updating our business directory last year, and I thought that was money well spent.
Okay, Councillor Ritchie? Councillor Osmond, shut your mic off, please.
Thank you, Mayor French. Could you just shed some light on the bottom one there, a new permissive truck route bylaw?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. A permissive truck route bylaw would basically be a review of all the township roads, and it would be, I guess, the best way to direct truck traffic through the township. So we would have to work with neighboring townships to determine where they would prefer their truck routes to be. We would have to work with the county to see, you know, what roads they would prefer trucks on, and then decide which township roads would be the best use of trucks traveling through the township, not within it.
So, Mayor French,
Follow up?
so this is a study that we're going to undertake, is that it?
I think CEO Brindley wants to pipe in on this.
Thank you, Mayor French. And to answer the question is, yes, it is an internal study, but also not only does it identify where we want truck traffic to go, it also identifies where we don't want truck traffic to go.
Continue? Yes, please continue.
The one there about the engineering and the Swilly Drain, can we pull that up, please? The engineering studies on the Swilly Drain, are we paying for this? Because what's the status with this Swilly Drain, and what's the cost involved with that? Can somebody answer that, please?
Director Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Ritchie. So in the 2018 budget, there's roughly $95,000 to do the environmental study in the menacing wetlands, and I believe that's subject to approval of the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. So if they do give us the go-ahead, we do have money set aside. 100% of it is funded either by way of benefiting landowners and/or we have reserve money, drainage reserve money to help assist with offsetting those costs.
Continue.
Mayor French, so this is this is a separate study to be done and to be paid for. Is that it?
Director Schmidt?
Correct.
Mayor French, where I'm coming with this is the amount of money and the resources, the amount of money that we get NVCA every year and the resources that they have. Why aren't they doing this instead of us paying extra and over and above that? Because honestly, they have a big administration over there. They have a lot of staff. And I would ask, why can't you guys do that and let us save some money here? We pay them $200,000 a year, and it keeps going up and that's fine. They got to fund it, but why aren't they doing this instead of always subbing it out? And that's a question that should be brought forward to them.
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mayor, and through to Councilor Ritchie. This is a municipal drain, so unfortunately, under the Municipal Drain Act, we are the ones who are responsible for it. That said, the NVCA is a benefiting owner, so they will have to pay for part of this as based on the per ratio of what they get. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but they do have to pay for a percentage of the study.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor French.
Councillor Coghlan, and then I'll go back and forth.
The permissive, through you, Mayor French, to Director Coleman, the permissive truck route bylaw, would that be entertaining or looking into anything to do with half loads or permission for half loads?
Director Coleman?
No, at this point, we wouldn't look at waiving any of our half-load restrictions. Typically, that's due to frost and frost coming out of the ground, so that we still would need to restrict the weight at that time of the year.
Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Allen?
Through you, Mayor French, the contracted services and consultants is budgeted in the base budget to go up to 778,000 from 695,000 last year, and 83,000, or 12% increase. And the note refers to anticipated increases in contracted services for catch basin cleaning, hard top sweeping, high shoulder removal, and winter maintenance. That seems like a significant increase. Can you expand upon the reason for the increase, please?
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. One of the most significant increases is actually just a shift. Previously, the CCTV contract was listed under equipment rentals. So I've lowered the equipment rentals and put it under contracted services. That's $35,000. In addition to that, since our sweeper is somewhat beyond repair and unsafe, there's $25,000 for a sweeper rental for the spring, and along with that comes a $25,000 deposit, which we would either get back or we could leave on a deposit for a sweeper for 2019.
Follow up?
Just follow on. The last deposit, that's not included in expense, though, is it?
Yes, it is included as an expense at this point. We haven't put any deposit down, so it would also be part of the expense.
Director Schmidt, the deposit is included in this number, 25,000?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen, yes, the 25,000 for the deposit is included as an additional expense at this stage.
Well, shouldn't that be reflected as a balance sheet item rather than an expense item? Because we haven't incurred it yet. It's like a deposit. It's not an income or expense, it's an asset. Or a deferred
Schmidt?
charge.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen, essentially, we put in the expense assuming that, worst-case scenario, we're not getting any money back. So as Director Coleman mentioned, it is a $25,000 deposit. We could get some money back. We might not get any money back. So we're budgeting worst-case scenario, if you will. There is an opportunity, as you mentioned, that we could get some of that money back and or all of that money. Not understanding how the contract's structured at this stage or who we're even going with. We've put in the expense of $25,000 at this stage. Again, worst-case scenario.
But would you say that there could be a case for lowering that by the $25,000 and not being, overly conservative by putting it in? I mean, is that a potential to find $25,000 that we don't know whether it's going to be an expense or not?
Director Coleman, do you want to comment?
Yeah, so the $25,000 deposit, when we return the sweeper, they would replace any brooms or replace any wearing items that require replacement, and then either refund us the difference or we can top it up and leave it on a deposit for 2019.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm looking at the printout, pretty colored pages with yellow, blue, and green. And on there, just up prior to what the Deputy Mayor was asking, long-term debt. In 2017, it was $475,000. We're going up to increase the interest and the principal payments by $173,999. So we all know we're on the right page. So my question is, that's not the debt, that's just the interest and the principals we're paying on the debt. Is that correct?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hanna, correct. It's the annual debt and principal payments that we'll be required to pay. And it's based on issuing $4 million in additional debt in 2018.
That was going to be my next question. You're smart as me. Thank you. So, on a serious point, what is the increased debt for? And I know I've read it, but it's not one particular thing. It's over a number of things to do with our Works Department area. Is that correct?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hanna, yeah, it's a number of road projects that have been completed recently and or are about to be completed in 2017. That's what the debt would be issued for, is those projects. There's 6 or 7 of them, I believe. I can't recall off the top of my head, but there are a number of them, all road-related projects.
Thank you. And I just got to, if I may, make one commercial announcement to our Director of Public Works, who I like a lot and does a great job. However, every year I get asked, because other people ask me why we don't outsource, so I just ask you to keep that somewhere on the horizon. Anytime you can look at outsourcing, to please do that to help keep me and the taxpayers happy. The other thing, too, I bring up every year is the money we spend to buy new sand to spray on the roads. And I always get the different responses back, but the best one I ever got was that the sand on the road gets run over by the traffic, it takes the sharp edges off and it won't stick anymore. But then we buy plow trucks that have a water tanker on that wets the sand so it doesn't blow off, so that kind of counters that excuse, or I'm sorry, I didn't mean it as that excuse, that the explanation I'm given. And I just watched the show on TV, and I believe it was Barrie. Barrie is now going to start to recapture and recycle their sand, where we in Springwater in the past have always just taken the sand, we sweep it up, and we discard it rather than recycling it. So my other point is, if you could keep that also on the horizon to look at an opportunity or the option of recycling our sand that we put on the roads, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Maybe Director Coleman, I'd like you to comment on that because, no, you comment.
Thank you, Mayor French. I did look into sand recycling. The city of Barrie spent just under $35,000 to recycle 4,200 tons of sand, of which that 3,600 tons was reusable. So they still had 6,000 tons to dispose of. That cost, based on the number of tons they used, cost them $9.52 a ton. It has to be tested to ensure that it still meets the Ontario provincial standards for winter sand. They have to top up, they're allowed to use, from the testing, they can use 75% recycled sand, and then they have to add 25% virgin sand to meet the Ontario provincial standards for winter sand. We're currently paying $7.78 a ton for virgin sand. We do not dispose of it. We take it to our pits and reuse it for berms, for pit cover, for putting out fires when we burn wood and stumps and whatnot. The city of Barrie, the reason they went to the recycled sand is they were going to have to pay $85 a ton to dispose of it because their landfill wouldn't take it anymore. Ours doesn't go to the landfill, so our cost for disposal is zero. And it gets reused as it is when it comes out of the sweeper.
Councilor Rich, you had a question?
Yes, I did. Mayor French, I'd like to go back to, we were talking about the deposit for the sweeper. So if we leave the money with them, what is the cost of that sweeper that we're going to be looking at? That's the question.
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. It's an off-lease sweeper that the owner, they would lease out to a company and then get it back after a year or two. So it's fairly new, and the cost of the rental is $25,000.
But the cost to buy a new one, though, this is a piece of equipment. If I could just go back to, well, in the springtime, when we do the Maple Syrup Festival, Public Works is out getting our town all cleaned up with a sweeper. And they do a great job, because the day of the Syrup Festival, if it's a nice day, like we've seen 20, 30,000 people. We're the largest one-day event of its kind in Ontario. So we're a showpiece. So to get it all cleaned up, and they do get it all cleaned up, we need that piece of equipment. Not just in Elmville, but in Hillsdale, in Phelpson, and any out of the communities. So whether it be up in Elmville or down at Stone Manor, this is a piece of equipment that we're going to need. So if it's in good shape and fairly new, I support it.
Thank you. Councilor McConkey?
On the truck route, the, what did you call it? I forget, but you're looking at reviewing the truck routes. Would the stakeholders be involved in that, or I just hope we're not going to come out and say something and get all my truck drivers upset, so just wondered how that's going to be.
Director Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor French. Yes, typically stakeholders are involved as well. What would be exempt from this would be I guess, local truck drivers. So say they drive back to the pit at night, which is wouldn't be on our permissive truck route, but they would still be allowed to drive on that truck, or on that road. What the permissive truck route, the goal of that is to get trucks from one end of the township to the other on the most economical, the safest, the best built road, as opposed to limiting movement within the township. So somebody that's moving to the township, if they live on a road that's not a permissive truck route, they can still move there. The garbage trucks can still go in and out. The municipal trucks can still go in and out. If they're delivering to a property on that road, they can still use that road. So the goal of this bylaw would be to just direct traffic from one end of the township to the other, as opposed to limiting individuals.
Councillor McConkey?
Follow up to that. So I have a gravel pit down the road for me, and they are very busy with the new development in Barrie and with the new development on Sunnydale Road. So if we were to look at, we wouldn't, they have to also run at a certain, they're trying to be cost effective themselves. So now they go down Sunnydale Road into Barrie. So if that was taken away from them, it would really have a big impact on their cost to do business. So I just want you to be cognizant of, we do have a lot of truck drivers who are employed within Springwater, and we just want to make sure that they can be cost effective as well, because with the price of gas going up and that, they just have to have efficient routes too. So I won't say any more. I think you know what I mean. As far as the co-op student, what if we took off the co-op student and we knew that we could apply for funding for a co-op student? Would the risk be very high?
Director Coleman?
I'd have to defer to Director Schmidt, and I don't know if there would be funding available for a co-op student. If we could, that would be even better.
I'll go to CAO Brindley.
Thank you, Mayor French, through to Councillor McConkey. We actually apply for funding for every position we hire. We're just not always successful of getting that funds. They tend to focus on certain types of positions, so we will be applying, but this is sort of in the case we can't get funding, this is what we'll need.
Okay, follow up, Councillor McConkey?
I got the train. I know that we did do the train study, and a lot of the crossings are in my area, and I know Simcoe County was at the stage where they were to hear back. So I'd be really interested to get that status in the next year, because I think that what I understood from Simcoe County is that we do have a couple of areas that do have blind spots and probably would qualify for funding. So that's a great initiative, and I support it fully. I just didn't know at what point we're supposed to be talking about the capital projects for the roads.
I think we're going to do that separate, and we're going to get down to the granular level.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor McConkey. Wednesday's session is scheduled for the specific road projects.
Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you to Director Coleman. When it speaks to the director position, operations techs, and op coordinator, there's an additional, or maybe it's not, asset management coordinator position. Is that funded specifically through Public Works, or is that spread out through multiple departments?
Director Coleman.
That asset management coordinator position has been removed for 2018, but to answer your question in the future, it will eventually be spread over all departments.
Follow up.
Thank you. So it's been removed. There's an updated sheet that I don't have, or because it's still showing on here in the 25 and 5.
Director Schmidt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Coghlan, are you reviewing the business plan? Is it part of the business plan? Because staff had originally talked about a number of different program changes that we were considering bringing forward to members of council. That was one of the ones that was on the list. However, through discussions through senior management, it fell off the list, if you will, just due to the timing of when the regulation was going to come forward, as well as the funding that we had received through FCM to move forward with our asset management plan. We decided that it wasn't our top 6 priority, if you will. We decided to defer that position until a later date.
Follow up.
And will that affect our asset management review that's happening in finance then?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Coghlan. No, again, we have received the money from FCM, and we're scheduled Thursday to start our kickoff meeting with the consultant. So you should be seeing something in the new year come to council on asset management. So.
Any other questions? I think good questions, well answered. So I need a resolution to move and second the be received. McConkey and Coghlan. That the 2018 draft budget Public Works section be received. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mayor French. Through you, I think to the clerk, when we discussed the library budget, we approved it. Why are we not approving, say, the Public Works budget?
Director Schmidt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Austin and all members of council. Essentially, how we set up the budget is that our service partners, being the library and the 2 conservation authorities, we essentially wanted council to make a decision, if you will, on those specific service partners. As it relates to all of the township departments, being Public Works, Finance, Parks and Rec, and so on and so forth, we didn't want to necessarily handcuff council, if you will, in approving certain sections until you've actually seen the full budget, and then you can if you'd like to make amendments to different sections of the budget after you've heard all of the different areas, we just thought it'd be more appropriate to move in that direction.
Okay, do we want to take a 5-minute recess, a comfort break? Because I think we'll have lots of discussion in the next item. Back up here, we will move on. Okay, we are going to reconvene our ongoing meeting, and I'll turn it back to Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I'll defer
Mr. Chen,
things
okay.
to Mr. Chen. He'll walk you through the Parks and Rec tab 8 of your budget binder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. So for the 2018 Recreation, Parks, and Property Departmental Budget, it's proposed to increase from about $1.88 million to $2,058,282. That's a variance of almost $174,000. And the increase cost per $100,000 in residential assessment amounts to about $5.48. The key drivers of this increase are the projected increase in salaries and benefits. That's from the compensation review and cost of living adjustment, and increase in group benefits, and increase in minimum wage, which hits the Recreation, Parks, and Property Department in a more outsized way. Second is proposed improvements to the parking lot and catch basements as at the Elmvale Arena. And the third key driver is facility improvements at the Elmvale Library, Midhurst Library, and Fire Station 3. There are proposed budget variances. These are the program changes would be for the recreation facility monitors and the outdoor maintenance worker. These would amount to about $95,281. For the major initiatives in the upcoming year, through your worship, I will defer to the Director of Recreation, Parks, and Property.
Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the major initiatives in 2018 are to continue to coordinate with the County of Simcoe to address the gaps in Springwater trails and connect the Great Trail, or the Trans-Canada Trail as it's more commonly known as. We still do have gaps between Springwater and the city of Barrie, and there are 2 gaps at the north end of Elmville that need to be addressed. We're continuing to work on that. Want to increase the level of support to the community recreation associations and grow community events. Continue to expand the partnership with the Township of Tiny Day Camps to offer a better overall experience and reduce both our costs. Establish north and south work depots to reduce the overall drive time and increase the productivity of the staff. Perform the additional property maintenance requirements associated with the Stone Manor Woods subdivision, Snow Valley Lowlands, in particular the additional trails that are involved with both those developments, the stormwater management pond and the wastewater treatment plants. And the other is to complete the renovations additions to Yard 1, Station 2 on Snow Valley Road.
Okay, well, let's start there, and let's have our questions from council. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mayor French. Sorry. Page 57, I believe it is.
Do you have the new handout copy we got?
Yes, yes. Hang on.
It wouldn't be
See,
in
my-
your binder
It's either
yet.
57. It's, see, my numbering is slightly different from what's on the screen. Okay, so it would be This one. Yeah. I think. No, it's not it. The- I'm confused. The bottom section says requested budget variances. There it is. Okay. Yes, my question is, above that, the fourth budget on the page. Facility improvements at the Elmvale Library and fire station, replacement of flooring. I'm wondering why that is coming out of the parks and property budget and not from the library budget and fire budget.
Director Belcour?
Thank you, Worship, through to Councillor Austin. Those improvements fall under the budget of the facilities in operation of municipal facilities. So it's a separate item within that. And the library itself is owned by the municipality and maintained by the municipality, so it's not part of their operating budget, but it is the municipalities. It's just, that falls under that category.
Other questions? Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Mayor French. Mr. Belcourt, under contractual services on the printout of the line item, the explanation D says that there's 39,000, I believe, for $39,500 to celebrate Springwater event, and I'm just trying to determine how that's in there. So basically, it was left in there from last year. It's not an add-on, so if we didn't want to do that, it would be subtracted from that requested amount. Is that accurate?
Director Belcour? Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Hannah. So you may recall that there was monies put aside in the 2017 budget for the Celebrate Springwater, which was fully funded from reserves. So essentially no impact on the 2017 budget. So we've removed those monies from 2017 and we've put in $39,500 for 2018 with no funding source, well, taxes. So to your point, Councillor Hannah, if you were to remove the 39.5, that would be a reduction in the overall budget by 39.5.
Thank you, and I think there was some suggestion earlier when we were talking about the library, that might be one way to have offset the 1.3% tax increase required to fund the requests that were made by the library. So I would like to hear from the other councillor that suggested that.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. At this time, I can put a motion on the table to have it removed from the budget.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Hannah? Discussion on that while it's being typed up is to remove the Celebrate Springwater event in its entirety. Councillor Austin?
I would support the motion because I think it's a large amount of money to be spent on a single event when we're trying to be careful with the money that we spent for our taxpayers. I think we can spend it much more wisely.
Councillor McConkey?
When can we have discussion if I see that the councillors jump to remove that money without asking, can there be a reduction and still have a successful event? I have been on this council since the first term and have always asked that we have some type of event. Elmvale is very good at their events. They have the Maple Syrup Festival and they have the the Fall Fair. We as Springwater, we want to brand ourselves, get identified, and we do nothing to identify ourselves as Springwater. Yes, maybe the attendance wasn't what we expected last time, but we did have a fairly good attendance for the first time. You have to do an event for a few years to build up attendance. And you have to let people know. Like, I'd like Springwater to have one event like New Tecumseh has the Potato Festival. Everywhere you go, Creemore has several festivals. Like, what is Springwater's? We don't have one. So, yes, $39.5 seems like a lot from the taxpayers' money, but I'd be willing, I think that, we outsourced some of the work last time. Like maybe if we directly went to some bands or we went to some local bands, I know that one of them lives right in a subdivision near me, and we could maybe do it a little bit differently. But I think our staff have to know too that there's going to be this event so that we can start to communicate it and get it known and that. So I'm really disappointed if the council does not want to put their foot in the ground and say, yeah, we are Springwater and this is going to be our event. I was proud of what staff did, and I'd like to see staff to continue in some type of event. Yes, I think that 39.5 is maybe a little bit too much, but, could they do it for 20?
Okay, when it gets to it, because I learned a whole bunch about Robert's rules, you might be able to make an amendment because it is germane to the conversation. Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. And just further to Councillor McConkey's comments about having an event that identifies Springwater, I think the initiative this council took this year to roll back the maintenance expenses on the hall boards. So that is an increase to what we're paying. So we are supporting the local hall boards, and therefore that's giving our local hall boards the initiative to make those events bigger. So Hillsdale will now have more money to spend on their events. Minising will now have more money to spend on their events. So by this council taking over, replacing toilets and paying for hydro, we've now increased the funding to those events. And while it would be nice to have an event that celebrates Springwater as a whole, I think that those events throughout the communities, and we help and we support those local smaller events to attract other people. Like going to the Wingdinger is fantastic. Going over to the Minising Slow Pitch, having that many events locally, and if this council continues to sponsor that, like we did with the $2,000 per hall board last year, we've now done essentially the same thing by infusing money into the hall boards. I was very supportive of the Celebrate Canada 150 in the event where we put on Celebrate Springwater for 150, but I think for myself, by us as a council supporting the local hall boards, that's what makes Springwater. That's how we as a council celebrate Springwater.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Allen.
Yeah, I agree with removing it. I think it certainly was a great event, and it was celebrating Canada 150. I think if we have one of these, consider having one of these events every 2, 3, 4 years, rather than an annual basis, then if we can afford it, once every 2 or 3 years, then maybe that's a consideration, but I don't support it for next year.
Any other comments? Okay, I have some comments. I fully concur with Councillor McConkey. And we've given lots of money, and we will be giving lots of money to local hall boards, and we want to see them succeed, and they are succeeding. They're doing fantastic events. But we keep saying we're a community of communities. I think there needs to be a central event. I think we're being so short-sighted. If we really want to bring people to Springwater as a big picture rather than just to Elmville, Phelpston, Fergusonville, wherever the case may be, Hillsdale. And quite honestly, I will not support removing it from the budget. I think it's extremely short-sighted from us trying to build up a brand and try and attract business and economic development and it doesn't have to be a $39,000 event, but it definitely, I think it should be, I'd like to see something put in 15 to 20,000, and I guess I leave it to, so right now we have a mover and a seconder that the event be removed from the 2018 budget, but I want to ask a question of the clerk. If someone suggests a different amount, it is still germane to the subject, to a resolution that hasn't been voted on. How can we go, if for some reason Councillor McConkey wanted to amend or whatever, or the mover and seconder want to amend, how would that be done?
Somebody could ask for an amendment stating a specific dollar amount. That would be voted on, and whether it would be carried or defeated would move on to this main motion as is.
Councillor Hanna.
Would it be appropriate just to wait until we're done this whole budget exercise as was adjusted by our Director of Finance and then make decisions? Maybe we're in a position where we don't have to remove all the money or none of it, and we won't know until we get through the budget exercise what other things we might be able to save money on. So I would be happy to wait till the end as was directed by our Director of Finance.
So can we table this motion until such time? Madam Clerk?
I would suggest that it be withdrawn if that is the intent, or the mover can request that the motion be voted on.
So mover, Councillor Colligan, would you like to withdraw it until the end of budget discussion on this area?
Sorry, through you, Mayor French. I was under the impression that we had this many budget sessions so that as we moved through them, we were dealing with Parks and Recs, and then we create a Park and Rec budget, and then it comes forward to council with the updates, as it did when we removed the $7,000 from the service partner. So we have an updated idea of where we want to go. I would like to see it removed, so if Councillor Austin's still willing to second it, I would like to have council vote on it. Sorry, Councillor Hannah, to vote on it, but I don't see the reasoning to keep it gone. Either you support that expenditure of money or you don't.
Okay.
I no longer want to second it, thank you.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor that the mover would like to proceed with. So I'm moving to amendments at this time then. Councillor McConkey?
I would like to get a procedure clarified.
Okay, sorry. The clerk just informed me since Councillor Hannah has withdrawn, do we have a seconder to remove it? Councillor Austin? No, okay. I need a seconder to remove $39,500 from the budget. Yes. Okay. Councillor Austin? Okay, now it's open to amendments. Councillor McConkey?
Procedure question. As to what Councillor Hannah said, and we go back to the Public Works. When I asked to review the capital project, there was stuff there that I wanted to maybe remove. But we said we would talk about the capital tomorrow night. So we are just receiving, is what I was told. We are receiving budgets tonight. So I think Councillor Hannah had a very good practical point where he said, let's receive the budget this evening, and then let's see at the end of it that if we have additional money. So when we get to the capital side to remove, so this is removing money, but it's more from the operation. So we can only touch the operational money? Okay, so we won't be touching capital then on, thank you.
No, and just a comment, there is a resolution on the floor. We either vote on removing it from the budget, see where that goes, but, or you can amend it, if someone wants to amend it. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. And I think for myself anyway, even if we have $40,000 left, I don't want to spend it on a one-day event. I think that there are different initiatives out there in this community. So I would like council to vote on removing this so that as we move forward through this budget process, we get a better idea of where that 1.46 or whatever the number is so that we can make that decision.
Okay, first of all, do I have an amendment?
I would like to amend it to have the request be for 15,000.
Do you have a seconder? Okay, we do not have a seconder, so the amendment, so we'll go back. And do you want to comment on the main motion?
My understanding of the process was that we were coming up with, now that we were into operations, we were coming up with ideas of potential changes to the operations and not voting on them a department at a time, but accumulating them before we get into capital to review all of them and vote at that point in time. For instance, I'm about to bring up at the right time the idea of going back to Public Works on that deposit that we referred to and changing that number to a certain number, which would save potentially $15,000 to $20,000 in taxes. Now, I can bring that idea forward now or at the beginning of the next session, but I think we accumulate these ideas and then we we look at them all at one time rather than voting on them piecemeal.
I think you'll find that last year we did kind of table and remove things as we went, but it's the will of council. I think we'll be spending a lot of time trying to revisit things, and we decided to separate the budget into these things. So quite honestly, we have a motion on the floor that has been duly moved and seconded, And so we need to vote on it, and I'll read the motion again. Moved by Coghlan, second by Austin, that the Celebrate Springwater event be removed from the 2018 budget. All those in favor? Carried. Okay. Moving on, Director Belcour, any other comments on the budget, or shall I just keep going with the council for answering questions?
You can proceed with questions.
Okay. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to Director Belcourt, the parking lot improvements and what they're catching, or what they're costing us. From what I understand, the municipal arena is ours to a 3-meter boundary, so is there a servicing agreement we have with the agricultural board in order to be responsible for the parking lot entirely?
Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Coghlan. The agreement is strictly based on use of the facility. There's nothing that speaks to parking lot maintenance, etc. However, the agreement does permit the township to use the parking lot and any improvements to it we've had to make over the years. And the improvements are to the section that run immediately in front of the arena, so basically the fire route, along where the 2 catch basins are located, where they have shifted over the course of time. And that's a result of the additional construction that was done in '94, where we cut up the parking lot, put in new manholes, etc. And we need to cut that out, regrade it, and repave it to reduce our liability and to create, because we do have some major ups and downs, similar like potholes, etc., that have occurred over the course of time.
Follow-up?
No, separate question.
Okay, carry on.
And not noting any program changes, is it still a $70,000 agreement with the city of Barrie? And do we have any additional information suggesting by postal code which residents are actually utilizing that agreement?
Director Belcourt?
The agreement is still in force. That was negotiated. It's in force until February 2019. We are working with them. They do have a new software provider that we're working to try and get the actual use from Springwater residents, noting all the new postal code changes. So we're hoping to have that very shortly. They're still in the implementation stage of what the software provider they've switched to.
Sure, carry on.
Thank you. And then in comparison to last year, are we running the camp programs with one less supervisor position this year?
Director Belcourt?
In the past years, couple of years, we've had what we've called the project coordinator. With the realignment of the position and the duties, that project coordinator's responsibilities are now rolled in with the recreation and special events coordinator's position. So we've eliminated that contract position.
Follow-up?
Thank you, Mayor French. And not being entirely familiar with what the coordination position was, so does that mean that the person here in the office is then going to be required to be on scene during camp, or are they, how is that going to work?
Director Belcourt?
Thank you again to Councillor Coghlan. No, she will not be required to be at camp for full time. She will be assigned, will attend if and when needed. We'll still have our camp supervisors in each location who essentially are responsible for the overall camp experience, supervising the camp staff. The project coordinator was basically an office position where that was to establish the program, set up the contract, set up the field trips, etc.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mayor French. I didn't understand the point Councillor Coghlan was asking about $70,000 and something to do with Barrie. Could I have an explanation about what she was referring to?
Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Austin. The $70,000 that Councillor Coghlan was referring to is the contractual agreement we have with the City of Barrie for our Springwater residents to use their recreation facilities and programs without being charged the additional user fee. And it also allows them to access all the facilities like similar to a City of Barrie resident. And primarily that is being able to sign up for programs, especially aquatic, when the program registration begins and not having to wait that 7 to 10 days lag time that other other non-residents have to wait in order to allow City of Barrie residents to sign up.
And where is that listed on the budget?
Director Belcour? Or Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Coghlan, or to Councillor Austin, sorry. It would be included in the contractual services and consultants line item.
Councilor McConkey?
I recall seeing an email that showed that other expenses or whatever include $12,500 for Sports Heritage Hall of Fame. I was just wondering, is that an expense, but then we get the revenue offset? I just need to understand that, how much revenue offsets the $12,500?
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor McConkey. So yes, the Sports Heritage has a separate cost center, if you will, within Parks, Recreation, and Properties. That section is essentially fully funded. So yes, we do have to show the expense, but there is offsetting revenue to negate, if you will, any impact on property taxes.
Other questions? Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. At our last meeting of council, when we received the information from Director Belcourt on the splash pad, at that meeting, it was the same meeting that we received the budget and the times for each meeting. At that meeting, I asked if we could have the splash pad discussed at the evening session so that residents would be able to attend. And the clerk did confirm at that time that recreation was on the books for that. So I was hearing discourse amongst council this evening that a splash pad should then be discussed later with the capital projects. The concern I have with that is that there would be an operational component associated with it if it was to be included in the budget. So I guess through whoever, are we able to have the discussion, knowing that there has been an enormous amount, or there has been emails received and there are residents here this evening. I would like to have a splash pad included in the 2018 capital budget, and understanding that we may not have a full operational year in 2018, and if it's 30,000, we would need to potentially have a portion included in the operation for 2018, so that if it is up and running, we do have the money to turn it on. So I would like to have that discussion with council this evening. If it just means that I'm simply going to put a motion on the floor, I can do so, but I would like to see that put forward this evening.
I'll take direction from our clerk on the discussion.
For order of business on any agenda, it may be taken out of order at the discretion of the chair.
Okay. So do I need a motion to take it out of?
It's at your discretion.
At my discretion. If the clerk says it's appropriate, I have to follow the direction of the clerk. So maybe we can get a motion on the floor, move it by Coghlan.
I'd just like to comment on that prior to the motion. As we've heard, this is a continuous meeting. So this is something that this council often does when there's a member, like during a regular council meeting. If we see a member in the audience that might be pertaining to whatever the issue is, we often move something up in the agenda to allow and afford them, be respectful of their time and allow them to carry on with their evening. So in my opinion, this, considering it's one continuous agenda, this is no different than something this council does on a regular basis.
Thank you for those comments. So if we wanted to, Councillor McConkey.
I just want to bring up the example where I asked to talk about something in Public Works in the capital plan, and was told I had to talk about it in the next evening. Again, that could also have operational impacts, but it comes from the capital plan. So I thought we would be following one set of rules this evening.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor French. I appreciate the analogy of moving things forward in agenda, but when we talk about capital, we're also talking about debt to finance the capital. Well, you have to. You can't talk about one thing without the other. So I think that it's not really analogous to move a significant capital expenditure forward to the operational portion of the budget review. So I'm sorry if people expected to have it dealt with tonight, but I think that we should be dealing with the operations as was scheduled to do, and then be looking at the total capital and the related financing with that capital. And that will happen starting on Wednesday night.
Any other comments on that? Councillor Austin?
Okay, following up on what Deputy Mayor Allen said, so suppose we finish talking about operational tonight, and then when we do discuss capital, if we make any significant changes to the capital program, can we then go back and make adaptations to the operational based on, okay.
Councillor Coghlan?
And thank you, Mayor French, and through you to Deputy Allen. I think that while we can offer apologies or condolences for coming out tonight, the reason that people are here tonight is because we told them we would be discussing this tonight. In an open meeting at our last one, we told them we would be discussing this. I specifically asked, Director Schmidt was sitting in that chair, and I said, can we discuss this? This is our only budget session in the evening that allows people to attend that are working full-time. This is the only one that allows them to be here to hear what this council has to say about this splash pad. So I asked that, and then I believe the clerk pointed and she showed me that it was 8 o'clock in that meeting. So then therefore, it was to the understanding of the public that this council will be discussing it tonight.
Thank you for those comments. Well, I will have to kind of suggest that based on, the way we're doing the budget, that deciding on one capital item tonight is out of order. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you. And then, so since we're talking about operational, I would like to have a request of $15,000 put into the 2018 operation budget for a splash pad. So how can I talk about the operational component without knowing what the capital components are?
No, but you can, same as we suggested we could modify amounts, you can certainly table a motion where you want to put in, basically conditional amount in the operating budget. Of course you can.
Can we speak?
That's at the discretion of the chair.
In budget meetings, the only presentations we take are from the senior staff and our partners, if you want to call it that, the MVCA, Severance Sound, and the library. And yes, you are. And we respect that. And we're trying to, I'm not going to have a debate, just so you know. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. Understanding that people are here, and that's fine, I can be called out of order and offer an apology at a later date. The clerk did say that it was at the discretion of the chair, and there's also in Robert's rule the opportunity for the council to vote to overrule the chair. So if the majority of council wants to speak to this evening, we can overturn the chair's decision.
Madam Clerk?
A motion can be tabled for such.
I would like to move that we overturn the decision of the chair, and council has a discussion during proceedings tonight.
Seconder? I do not have a seconder.
Boo, Katie Austin!
Please, no outcries. I understand this is a very, very,
Then talk about it, come on!
we will. Please, please.
Yeah, we're not here. Turn it down again. This has gone on for like 7 years, we've been asking for a splash pad. We've done presentations, we offered to fundraise, and nothing gets done. We're sick of it. Katie Austin, I believe, has been known to call.
Okay, okay.
Point of order.
First of all, point of order. I'm sorry. You're not, I'm not going to have insults and that back and forth between councilors or the audience. I understand your frustration, but we did outline a budget process, and if we miscommunicated, I apologize for any miscommunication. But we are dealing with millions and millions of dollars, and don't make it of your money, and don't make an assumption that this council's denying it. We haven't discussed it. So it's not a good idea to make an assumption. Sorry?
We've all made accommodations, we've all made childcare arrangements to attend this evening. And what Councillor Coughlin has said is that it's been moved to a time where we can attend. So we've all made arrangements to be here. Those of us who couldn't, I'm sure council can attest to the amount of emails that have been received. And we are happy to go around and collect signatures if that's what you need. But we have arranged to be here tonight. We were told it would be here for 8 o'clock. We have arranged childcare, and to hear that no one will second this motion, it is disgusting.
You have the choice to speak to us, and you're choosing not to. We're here to talk, and you're choosing not to speak to us when you have the absolute full opportunity to discuss it with us tonight. And you're just choosing to ignore us.
No, I'm not choosing to ignore it. We're trying to follow a process that we agreed to some time ago.
You have the choice to override that process, and you should be doing it in favor of your taxpayers, and you're choosing not to.
Okay, thank you for those comments. So let's see. Is there any other discussions on the budget? Councillor Austin.
I want to thank all the people who came out to the meeting tonight. And as Councillor Coughlin said, please accept our apology that it wasn't a very clear thing. It's my turn to talk. Thank you. I counted 60 emails, and they went to all of council. So council has been hearing from you. They have they have received very clearly all the reasons supporting the request for the splash pad in Elmvale. Okay, they have been giving it thought, I'm sure, just as I have. What we're talking about here is just going through the proper process, and I have to respect that that is the will of council to do it in that manner. It does not mean that we are going to be turning it down tonight. It means that we're going to discuss it at a time which we decided on earlier.
So back to, do you want to table, and I'll go to Director Schmidt, a provisional motion of putting a certain amount in the operating budget, so when we get to that point, at least we know where we're at? Would that be appropriate? Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council. Again, it's really at the discretion of council.
All right, so Councillor Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor French, and understanding that the information that council has is probably not going to change between now and Wednesday. We understand that the cost of reciprocal is about $30,000 to $32,000, and that we would not be able to get a splash pad built and have it operating for the full year. So I would like to see $15,000 put in place so that if we do go to tender with this ASAP and we do get it awarded, we're able to put the splash pad and have it operational for a portion of 2018. I would like to have that in. I know that it's going to be refuted, but I'm going to put that motion forward.
Okay, can I have a seconder for the motion? Okay, Councillor Austin. And discussion, Councillor McConkey?
I find that this still doesn't follow protocol, because if you're going to have a discussion on the splash pad, it comes when you're going to pay for the capital. And Director Schmidt goes back and he adjusts the books. Just like the Deputy Mayor said, he has something and it would also affect the books. So without full debate tonight, because if this motion went forward, it's a full debate. Because I'm not going to say, yeah, I'm going to agree something and give someone blind faith that we're going to go forward with it. So, like if the residents here saw a vote that supported Councillor Coughlin, they would feel that the whole splash pad is supported. I cannot make that until I have a conscious debate with all of yous on the capital part.
But I find the motion appropriate, because if for some reason after a lot of debate, the council didn't support it, that line item would be adjusted and removed when we kind of come to the final approval of the budget, because we're receiving information. Okay, Councillor, or Deputy Mayor Allen first.
Thank you, Mayor French. The motion, I believe, is, what, 15,000, is that what it is?
Yes.
And that is just based on the half-year operating cost. What is not included in that is the financing cost for the $350,000, which I believe Director Schmidt said could be between $37,000 and $40,000 to finance the splash pad. So that money has to be found from somewhere if it's a 218.
So,
Okay,
Mayor French?
please, you're out of order. Okay. Councillor Austin.
Noted.
2 points. The first one, the key word in our motion is provisional, which means that there's no guarantee that we are going to go ahead with the splash pad. It's provisional. Secondly, in response to Deputy Mayor Allen, whether or not we have to incur insurance costs is up in the air. The debt costs, that's up in the air depending on the whole outcome of the capital budget. So what Councillor Coghlan and I are asking for is just the 15,000. That's all we're asking for. We'll deal with any other costs such as the debt financing if it needs to be done.
Okay, Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you. Two comments. The first one is, there is a Elmvale Hydro Fund, which council will remember from when we supported EDHS and we backstopped the $200,000, and the $100,000 was also backstopped for the arena. That came out of the Elmvale Hydro Fund. That money can only be used for Elmvale. It's much different than the reserves that we have. This splash pad can go in with no impact to the operating or capital budget. The money is here. It's here now. There's no cost. There's absolutely no cost. There's $417,000 sitting in that account right now. Is that not correct?
Director Schmidt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Coghlan, sorry. There is over $400,000 in the Hydro Reserve Fund.
So aside from the DCs, whatever percentage is left over after DCs are allocated to this job, should council decide to do that, there is no impact to the 2018 operating or capital budget.
If we took all the funds
If you-
from that one fund, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, assuming all funds
And
come.
secondly, through you, Mayor French, to the clerk, I just want to be very careful because this is something that I do care about. If I put forward a motion this evening and the members of council feel that they should have the capital debate before voting on this, if it's defeated procedurally, can I bring forward a second motion within 12 months? I can't, if it's defeated tonight because council wants to wait and have the discussion and it's defeated, I cannot bring it forward again during this budget process, during this one consecutive meeting, according to procedure, correct?
Madam Clerk.
A reconsideration may be asked for this motion, but only once.
Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor French. All I would add is that based on what Councillor Coghlan is saying, I don't see the need for the $15,000 motion, because if it was to be approved, the money could be taken from the Hydro Fund to pay for that $15,000, and it wouldn't need to be a motion to put it in there tonight.
Director Schmidt, is the 15,000 operating, could it come from that hydro fund, or is that strictly used for capital?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council, I'm not sure how prescriptive the agreement was. It, I believe, indicated that the funds were to be utilized in Elmville. I'm not sure it's specific to whether it needs to be capital or operating. I will caution that from a capital perspective, one-time cost, it would probably be appropriate. For taking funds out of a hydro reserve fund for an operating cost, I would caution you that at some point, whether it be 2019 or 2020, you're going to have to factor it into the budget at some point.
Okay, so we,
Point of clarification.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
The fact that it's provisional means that it can be reviewable before we finalize the budget, correct?
Yeah, well, the whole budget
Yep.
is, yeah, we can move it. Yeah, and actually, I didn't have the microphone on. Yep, I mean, the fact that it goes in, same as the other items that we've received, there's, the only thing we've approved is the partners, the Conservation Authority, the Conservation Association, and the library. Anything else in this budget, the idea is to get everything on the table so Director Smith can give us some idea where we're headed. And then in the final throes of it, yes, through motion, we can put in and take out to come to what is acceptable to this council at any point as we go. Because we're simply kind of suggesting things be included in the budget, and then we'll make a final kind of adjustment at that particular time. It's my understanding.
But the spring water events.
Well, actually, it's been finalized, and I guess at some point, if someone wanted to kind of undertake some sort of a celebration, they could probably propose that too. Unlikely, but possible. Any other questions or comments? Okay, the resolution is moved by Coughlin, second by Austin, that $15,000 for the operation of a splash pad in Elmville be included in the 2018 budget. All those in favor? Opposed? That is lost.
Thank you. I can ask for that recorded, right? Yeah, can I have that recorded, please?
A recorded vote was requested by Councillor Coughlin. When I call your name, if you can please state yes or no. Councillor Austin,
Yes.
Councillor Coughlin,
Yes.
Councillor Hannah,
No.
Councillor McConkey,
No.
Councillor Ritchie,
No.
Deputy Mayor Allen. No. Mayor French.
Yes.
The motion is lost.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor French. And for clarification on procedure, so after the capital portion is on Wednesday, so at that meeting on Wednesday, at what point, and we've been pretty good on timelines, so can we re-communicate to the members of the audience this evening at what point this capital project will come forward, and I can ask council to then consider putting a splash pad in Elmville and to reconsider the operational costs associated?
Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The meeting on Wednesday starts at 3 o'clock. I don't have the actual agenda in front of me. As it relates specifically to this project, that's in council's hands as to when you discuss that. But I believe on the agenda, maybe the clerk can speak to the time frame.
Yeah, I have it right here. It's we start discussing the capital and 6-year capital plan at 4 o'clock.
And through you, Mayor French, understand that we begin discussing capital at 4 o'clock. Understand there's a lot of capital items. Would it be fair to say at 5 o'clock we could discuss this item?
We will bring our kids. Get ready.
Now, remember, Wednesday, we have a council meeting at 6:30, so, we have to wrap our.
I
that
don't
meeting
want them to have to show up again and us not discuss it. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to be very, very, very clear this time. What time are,
Okay, no,
it's at the discussion, it's at the discretion
Okay,
of the chair.
let's not have, I don't want a debate between councilors, please. Let's go through the chair. Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's no reason we can't, as we go through the capital budget, kind of table that if you want to. Use that expression until 5 o'clock. Would that work, Madam Clerk? Is there any issues with that procedurally? Since it's at my discretion, then, okay, we'll say it's 5 o'clock.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the Recreation, Parks, and Property budget? Okay, I need a mover and a seconder to receive this. We do appreciate your coming, and I'm sorry you're upset, and I apologize for us miscommunicating with you. A mover and a seconder. Excuse me, let's not have a debate on council, please. We're discussing the budget. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the budget? Okay, Deputy Mayor Allen, Councillor Hannah. That the 2018 draft budget Recreation Parks and Property section be received. All those in favor? Carried. Deputy Mayor Allen.
Could I revisit Public Works to put a motion forward to reduce the contracted services consultants expense by $20,000, being $20,000 of the $25,000 sweeper deposit, on the assumption that the security deposit pertaining to the sweeper will only require $5,000, and the rest will be a capital item that would be returned to us, so not an expense item, and that finds $20,000 in our budget.
I would like, okay, well, let's see if there's a seconder. I think there's some problem here unless someone can answer the questions, because I'm not sure it's that straightforward, but we have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Coghlan?
So for clarification, and through you, I guess, to Director Schmidt now, from what I understand it, there's like a rental portion for 25,000 and then the deposit. So essentially it's a 50.
I need to get the motion on the floor before we can discuss it,
Why?
because to follow proper procedure. So I do have a seconder.
I'll second it. That's
Okay.
So Madam Clerk is busily typing. And Deputy Mayor Allen, you may have to provide some guidance to the wordsmithing. While we refine this, are you able to speak to it, CEO Brindley? And I don't think our director is here, because I just want to make sure that the motion, is actually dealing with all the financial facts, or maybe Director Schmidt, do you have an understanding of it? Is the motion appropriate, or are we misunderstanding something that was presented to us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to members of council. It's my
Point of
understanding.
order. We're not to speak till it's been tabled. You just told me I couldn't ask questions until it's tabled. It's not tabled.
I have a mover and a seconder, I believe.
Yes. You seconded. Yeah, but this hasn't been read. Nothing's been.
Oh, I think we know what the. Okay, I'll wait until it's finished then. Okay, Carrie, the clerk will read the resolution.
So the motion would read that the Public Works operational budget item contractual services / consultants be reduced by $20,000, being $20,000 of the $25,000 sweeper deposit on the assumption that the security deposit pertaining to the sweeper will only require $5,000 as an expense.
So moved by Allen, second by Coghlan, I believe. And maybe just to get some clarification before we get into the discussion or debate, Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding that we have $25,000 in the budget for the rental of a machine, and then in addition to that, we also have $25,000 for the deposit, so essentially $50,000. By reducing the deposit to $5,000, the risk that we may run is if, when we return a piece of equipment, if there's additional damages beyond the $5,000, it would require staff to find additional funds within the operating budget if this motion was to pass.
Okay, so might be a false sense of saving. Okay, that's fine. Questions? Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, and I guess through you to Director Schmidt until Director Coleman's available, when we borrow and we put deposits down, what is our typical, I guess there'd be no way of knowing because we could end up in an accident with it. Like there's no way of knowing what the typical expense is on it. So, and it's the $25,000, that's obviously determined by the company that we're having the rental from, or is that negotiable with them?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Coghlan. It's my understanding that we haven't secured a rental with anybody at this stage, and it's my understanding that we haven't rented a machine of late because we've had our own. So I'm not sure what the expense could be. So of that deposit, we may get back $20,000, we may get back $5,000. I don't know. That's subject to the wear and tear on the actual sweeper itself. So.
Follow up, and then I'll go to Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, and I don't know if we can ask for clarification as well. So that item's in the capital, the 6-year for 2019. So what would the savings or cost implication be why are we spending $25,000 renting something if we're just going to need to buy it next year?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Coghlan, what are we buying in 2019? Sorry, I missed that point.
So I thought that the street sweep or the sweeper was in the budget for 2019.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
So we're going to rent this for $25,000 every year?
The idea was, I think, is because of the cost of purchasing a brand new sweeper, is that the Director of Public Works wanted to do a test pilot on the rental to see whether or not we could save some additional save some costs, as opposed to going out and trying to purchase a brand new piece of equipment.
Okay. So what was...
Okay, CEO Brinley, you had a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's, as was mentioned, and this came from a comment as well from Councillor Hanna, we're looking at contracting out some services. We're looking at being creative and hopefully at the end of the day spending less money. The cost of a new sweeper is extensive. It's several $100,000, and when it comes to our reserves, they're not as strong with a lot of the other competition we have for our reserves. So the concept was, let's try to rent one for a couple of years, and that hopefully we'll see if it saves us money. At the end of the day, it also will push back so that once we have more development charges coming in and more revenue coming in, because some of the sweeper itself, some of it I would understand is DC'd, but some of it's still tax supported because this is an existing sweeper. This isn't a growth related sweeper. So this was just the Director of Public Works looking at a creative and different way of piloting, bringing a piece of equipment on as averse to buying. So you could find 2 years from now that we will buy one, but it's right now we'd like to rent one because we think it'll save us money.
Deputy Mayor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor French. Director Schmidt, can you remind us what your estimate of the surplus might be this year and what it was last year, in case we need to exceed the 5,000 potentially?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen. So as for 2017, I don't have a number for you as to what the surplus and or deficit could be. For 2016, the surplus was over $443,000.
Any other questions on that item? Okay. Oh, Councillor Hannah?
Thank you. As the CEO Brindley mentioned, several years I mentioned that the city of Barrie outsourced it, and they had a contract, and I think it was significant savings at that time, but maybe it's because they got a good deal. My question is, what's the advantage of reducing this? Is this just so we lower our estimated tax increase? Is that why we're doing this? Okay.
Okay, so the resolution, if you want me to read it, I will. Moved by Allen, second by Coghlan, the Public Works Operational Budget, item contractual services consultant, be reduced by 20,000, being 20,000 of the 25,000 sweeper deposit on the assumption that security deposit pertaining to the sweeper will only require $5,000 as an expense. Question? Okay. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, and we've received the, so I guess we're, yeah, Mr. Belco is already gone, so I guess we've taken care of him. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. When a corporation of this size does have contractual services, I'm assuming we would be insuring that vehicle, or is that, so if there was an accident, wouldn't that be covered through insurance anyway?
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, through the mayor to Councillor Collins. There's probably a bit of both. We're renting the equipment, so I don't doubt there's an insurance policy that comes with it. But I don't doubt we also have our insurance as well in case. In this case, it's our driver actually driving the equipment. Unlike almost all the City of Barrie's sweepers are actually, there's actually a contract person who comes in and actually sweeps for them. But obviously the Director of Finance has his finger up, so I'll let him add as well.
Okay. Director Schmidt.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. And just to further to what the CAO mentioned, usually when we enter into these agreements, we are required to provide proof of insurance. So that is part of the deal. So as the CAO mentioned, it is our driver, but we are required to provide proof of insurance in order for the actual contract to be finalized. So.
Okay.
Just
Follow
one,
up?
yeah, sorry, last one. How many hours do we normally put on a street sweeper? Like, that seems $25,000 for, I mean, there's probably not a lot of street sweepers out there for rent, but just, I'll follow up. Never mind, that's fine.
I don't know. Sorry.
Okay. No other comments? I guess back to Mr. Chen. Are you going to continue?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The proposed 2018 budget for the Planning, Community of Adjustment, Economic Development, and Bylaw Departmental budget is proposed to be $648,579. That's a $90,172 increase over 2017. That increase is equivalent to a $2.84 per $100,000 in residential assessment. The drivers of the $90,172 increase are due to increased salaries and benefits, and those are the things that we've talked about: compensation review, cost of living adjustment, proposed increase in group benefits, as well as the second phase of the official plan review and update, and funding for the community improvement plan. There is a requested program change for a bylaw enforcement officer, and that impact would be just under $52,000. Through your worship, I will defer to the Director of Planning to speak about the major initiatives.
Thank you. Director Spagnol.
Thank you, Mayor French and Council. The major initiatives that are outlined by staff in the 2018 budget include the completion of the Phase 1 official plan review, update, and growth management strategy, along with Phase 2 of the official plan review update, which will include a number of background studies which will relate to policy development and public consultation. Those background studies will actually form the information that will have to be considered when policy is being drafted through the second phase of the official plan review. Staff expects that to be a high budget item just because of the amount of studies that will be required to inform the official plan process. Also included in that will be the county municipal comprehensive review process. that will be more along the lines of any resources that we may need to tap into to make sure that the township has input into the municipal comprehensive review that's conducted by the county that may require additional consulting and whatnot with respect to our OP process. In addition to that, we're also outlining key initiatives being the community improvement plan. It'll be the implementation side of things where budget dollars will be needed to actually implement and initiate the programs. And then the marketing strategy is also outlined within the economic development strategy, where there's budget dollars that are set aside to actually move forward with the recommendations that may flow from the marketing strategy, which is currently being worked on by eSolutions. And lastly, it's somewhat of an unknown, but as council knows that there are reforms that are coming down the that will be in place in 2018 with respect to the OMB reform. And there may be additional dollars needed from a budget standpoint related to township public process. The word from the lawyers is that the public process will be relied upon largely to form the background information to be considered by the OMB or the tribunal. That may have an impact on the township process where there might be enhancement for notification, there might be the need for more documentation, things of that nature. So those are the key major initiatives in 2018. I'd like to reiterate Mr. Chen's comments about the program change for a bylaw enforcement officer. Staff has noticed an increase in volume in calls, and as far as that position goes, it is required to provide for backup and redundancy so that there can be an enhancement to the level of service provided to the residents. Staff has noticed the higher volume with respect to calls being mainly in the Stone Manor Woods area, and I think with the second phase coming on stream in 2018, that volume will increase further, and I'm here to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you for that overview. Questions, please. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mayor French, to you, to the Director of Planning. Under expenses, special projects and events, a significant increase in the budget. What special projects and events are we talking about?
Director Spagnol.
Through your Mayor French to Councillor Austin, the special projects and events would be more along the lines of anything that would be economic development driven. So there is with the program that's in place, there is I guess a direction to move forward with events so the municipality to have a more active role in participating in events.
Carry on, Councillor Austin.
My other question is, under variance explanations on the back page, Part C, increase due to funds. What is the Midhurst corridor study?
Director Spagnol.
Thank you, Mayor French, to Councillor Austin. The Midhurst corridor study is to deal with the Bayfield Street corridor. That was identified by staff and through discussions, I think, at the council level through the official plan as an area that needed to be looked at as part of the official plan review. What the corridor study is intended to do is take a look at the uses that would be more appropriate for the corridor, take a look at urban design and how the corridor can be planned, and also take a look at access along the corridor to allow for traffic to move more effectively, but also providing for a downtown core in Midhurst. The corridor study is seen to be a major initiative because of the importance of the core area for Midhurst, and what this would do is set the stage for how the corridor would be planned. Through the corridor study, that would inform the official plan review process so that the municipality can take an active role in making sure that the corridor is developed properly.
Councillor Austin.
Would there be some similarities then with what Wasaga Beach Town Council is doing in terms of their Main Street initiative? Some sort of similarities?
Director Spagnol.
Thank you, Mayor French, to Councillor Austin. I think there would be similarities to that. I don't know about the extent and the cost that's associated with it, but what the intention is to provide for policies and actually try to plan for the corridor so that the municipality can take a lead and effectively plan for something so that the corridor is actually developed in a proper manner so that it's taking a look at urban design, downtown core. So it is something similar to that.
Councillor Anna.
Thank you. To our Director of Planning, I have concerns, sir, with the need for a new or an additional bylaw person. I say that, I'm sorry I don't have my notes with me. I don't know how I bought the wrong book, but I looked at the monthly reports. I looked at the number of charges laid. I looked at the number of calls for service. And if you, or if council has already checked the agenda for this coming Wednesday in the bylaw report on there, you can see the year-to-date's not much of an impact, not much of an increase. So I have concerns about that. I also, going back, I think it was the previous council meeting, we approved the fire department, the planner, the building inspector, and other people, I guess, to have the powers of doing bylaws and enforcing them. I think our director of, or somebody over in building. So with those impacts, I'm not sure until those things have been implemented and worked out whether there will be as much of a demand for bylaws there currently is now. I know what you're saying about the new areas with the buildup. So I would, I guess, try to impress the rest of council that maybe we should just put this off until there's a demonstrated need for an additional bylaw person. And I don't mean to be embarrassing anybody, but it was about 2 winters ago, there was a lot of letters generated by our bylaw department to people with snow plowing complaints, if you like. And it was explained to me at that time, quite honestly, that the director of the day, or I'm sorry, the clerk of the day had asked the Public Works to let them know of any possible violations to help the bylaw officer generate some activity because the bylaw officer didn't have much to do. I'm sorry to say that, but that's what I was told, and based on that information, I have trouble supporting an additional bylaw officer at this time.
Okay, Director Spagnuolo, and also I guess I have to caution council, we have to be cautious with derogatory remarks, is all I can say. Director Spagnuolo.
Thank you, Mayor French. I think when looking at the volume, what the volumes don't necessarily capture is the amount of follow-up that has to go in and the expectation of people who are actually calling in. What we're experiencing is that people who are calling in want to talk to somebody, not during necessarily regular hours, but they also want to be able to get a hold of somebody and show that there's somebody investigating something outside of work hours. And the expectation with this position would be to provide for that additional service to residents so that they are actually, so that we have the ability to have a staff member go out and enforce after hours when a lot of times that's when people are home. That's when you frequently have a number of conflicts. And what this would do is provide for that backstop for the after hours calls. In addition to that, there would also be some weekends involved as well. So what we're finding is the volumes appear to be staying the same, but it's actually an increase in volume for the service level because people are calling in and want to be able to talk to somebody and want bylaw enforcement to act when they call in. And to do that with one bylaw enforcement officer, respectfully, is impossible.
Follow up, if I may, Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to be critical of our bylaw person or staff at all. I'm just suggesting that that was the explanation of the workload at that time. And yes, I do agree that there are some calls after hours because they come to me.
Other questions or comments? I'll go to Councillor Austin.
If we were to approve another bylaw enforcement officer, would there be any change to the current practice of enforcing bylaws on a, what's the word I'm looking for? On a complaint basis? Is that the right term?
Director Spagnuolo.
Thank you, Mayor French, to Councillor Austin. Really, the philosophy of the department really depends on where council wants to go, but what it would do is allow bylaw to be a little bit more proactive because we do have more resources. The one point I'd also like to make just about the redundancy and the need for a bylaw enforcement officer, I can tell you that I take the overflow of calls when bylaw enforcement is not available, so do other staff. And I can tell you that there is a high level of volume that comes in after hours, and it is felt quite a bit when the bylaw enforcement officer is not available or on vacation or other types of instances. So it's one of those things where there is an overflow of calls that do come in. I see them, and so do other members of staff at both the senior levels and also other staff working in building and whatnot. So it is something that is experienced, I think, right across the corporation.
Other questions? Councillor McConkey?
Last year, we had a summer student. Do you see that you'll continue that program? Because I thought that that was effective. And then I have another question after that.
Director Spagno?
Mayor French, through to Councillor McConkey, I don't want to be greedy. I think that if there was the opportunity for another bylaw enforcement officer, I don't think that we'd be looking for that summer position. We did notice that with the summer position, however, that there was a lot of help as far as taking on additional calls during the more busier months. But I would have to think that if we did have a full-time position come in, that we wouldn't be looking for the summer position.
Follow up?
I have difficulty, similar to Councillor Hanna, when, we get monthly reports and show the stats of the bylaw, and it doesn't look, it doesn't look that busy. And then you look at, we just appointed some directors or different people to assist. I don't know if it's just communication or just receiving a statistical report, like you are explaining a little bit more this evening, how, it's the time per call and stuff. I don't know whether it's a statistical report that needs to change, but something's lacking in the communication for us to sort of understand that there is that backlog and that there is that need and drive. Like, again, it goes back to the library, we don't know that you're realizing this, and so then we hear it here, and it just sort of says, yeah, well, we're going to have some more. But when you read any of the facts here, it doesn't really offer the support until we have the conversation. So that's all I have to say.
Any comment on that, Director Spagno?
Yes, thank you, Mayor French. I think the only comment would be is that the question is whether or not the workload and the volume is overwhelming already. And I can tell you that when I have to backfill for the bylaw enforcement officer, I get inundated with calls, being one person involved in that process, because the amount of follow-up that happens when you get one complaint, I would have to say is not understood until you have to follow up with the original complainant, and then you have to follow up with the person or the property that's being complained on. And then there comes into trying to come to some sort of a resolution to deal with it. So I think it's a matter of taking a look at the volume of calls that are coming in and the level of services that's being asked for by the residents, and whether or not one bylaw enforcement officer can provide that level of service and effectively respond to all those calls without being overwhelmed. And I think it just gets compounded when you have the after-hours calls and whatnot, where I think you're correct, Councillor McConkey, that maybe the volume is not effectively represented in the reports. But I can tell you that there is an overflow of calls that come in related to bylaw.
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mayor. Some things to consider as part of this too is, as Director Spagnell has brought up, is that example one dog owner liability complaint, DOLA complaint, could be probably as many as 10 to 15 hours alone just on one dog complaint. And then if it goes to court, our officer in court is on court all day waiting for that to happen. So the numbers don't appear high, but let me tell you, the amount of time spent on each of these is quite high. And to address, Councillor Hanna's concerns, and I realize about, some of the plowing issues and cars on roads, but those were happening at night. when our officer wasn't available. And the great idea that came through what council saw recently was, let's get our road patroller essentially to be able to do bylaw enforcement offenses so that person can ticket. Our bylaw enforcement wasn't available at the night when those things were happening and were identified by our plow drivers. The other thing just to mention is the intent for the position for me is that it is not 9 to 5. That position is going to be an afternoon shift, and also look at weekends, because that's where I think we're not addressing. That's where the level of service I feel is lacking, and the need for us to be able to respond to complaints, because most people get home at night and they call us and they want to be addressed, they want their concern addressed. So the intent of this position, if council so chooses, would be that it's an afternoon shift, weekend shift. How that going to lay out in terms of what weekends, maybe every second or so. But the idea is this person will work after hours. And I just want to respond to the summer student request. It was really nice to have it. And if you remember our summer student, he was imposing, 6 foot something. The challenge is, as a summer student, we still can't put him in the line of fire. And not that by any means are these police positions, but we can't have him working alone at night. Or on the weekends, those kind of things. So he was a great resource and nice, but really our scope for a summer student is different than our scope for a full-time employee. So I just offer those as council's considering this as part of the entire budget. But thank you.
Councillor Hanna?
Thank you. I'd just like to add, I've never heard one complaint about our bylaw officer, the current bylaw officer. The other thing I'd like to add to what Councillor McConkey is saying about communications, Robert would know that the OPP track calls for service, and they generate their billing, I believe, in part on calls for service. Maybe that's a category we could be tracking for bylaw complaints.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to Director Spagnol. With the second position coming on, I think that it's great. I think that to be efficient, we shouldn't have our Director of Planning answering bylaw complaints or being in court. I think that Director of Planning needs to be focusing on planning, and if we need to fulfill this position. But when I look at the report, and I agree that there could be more information provided in it, but it's not just one person that's making all that happen right now. So thank you for the information and understanding that it's a team that's happening, and we do need to respond to this. Our residents we all get the calls. There's many, many calls, and they do have an expectation on the level of service, and we need to provide it.
Any other comments? I have some comments. More of a question, Director Spagnol. I like the idea of broadening our hours. Now, I'm just curious, with our current bylaw officer, would there be a plan to kind of change the way the hours of work, and is that even permitted? Because it's been, for the most part, a 9 to 5 days a week. Is it possible, from an HR perspective, to put in an effective rotation of some sort to meet the needs and more hours in the evenings and on weekends? Or is our situation that our current bylaw officer, their working agreement is based on certain hours? CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Your Worship. Currently, there is some diversity in the experience. There is some weekend work when it relates to events like the Maple Syrup Festival or other things. However, that said, I think you've expressed an area where the position primarily is a 9 to 5 position, and for us to move it to a different hourly, we'd actually have to give what's called working notice under under the Employment Standards Act. So if this individual has been with us several years, we'd have to give a number of months' notice, working notice, to move that person to a different shift.
Thank you. It's just a question, as I said. No, and also I think the fact that we have a number of other kind of employees, designated bylaw officers, I think the intent is to, especially like building inspectors and all that, that they can actually kind of, if necessary, lay charges or whatever the case may be. And I think that was the purpose of these, kind of, if you want to call it licensing these other bylaw officers, just to broaden kind of our perspective, because under, I guess, the Offenses Act, you have to be designated. So I'm supportive of it. I'd like to see what the revenue generation is, and hopefully the revenue generation is offsetting the cost. And if it's, if it's not, and then I guess we have to revisit and maybe figure a way of doing it. But for the moment, I'm supportive of it. CEO Brindley?
Your worship, thank you. I just want to say that I love the revenue generation idea, but get ready for more complaint calls if that happens, because with writing more tickets will come more complaints to our council members. So I just want to bring that up.
So the best way of not having any complaints is to have no bylaw officers. Okay, Councillor Cock.
Thank you, Mayor French. I just wanted to go back to what Katie or Councillor Austin had spoke to. The special events and projects, what events are these that we're talking about? Because I know town halls have been removed. I'm just trying to think what else would come out of planning's budget.
CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I'm probably a little more intimate with this part of the budget. An example, there's a number of county initiatives and initiatives that we will partner with throughout the year. It could be anything from, example, a sponsorship to an existing event. Recently, the Economic Development Group looked at the Bio Blitz. So that's where this money would come from. Council, we also, if you recall, we had a speaker. I'm trying to remember the gentleman who was in Wasaga Beach. Doug Griffiths. This would come from this fund. So it's not planned that we have 5 events planned, but it's a money allocation so that when things come up, we can take advantage of these things, whether it's also the Skilled Trades Expo. A little bit goes into a number of different things through this pot.
Okay, I'll follow up with you,
And
Councillor
this
Coghlan
is separate
first.
from the ECDOV funding, or this is the ECDOV funding? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Austin?
So I think it would also include, we sometimes attend trade fairs or shows, and we send staff with, our banners so that we make our presence known, again, under economic development. We purchased a lot of banners and brochures and things like that we can take to those kind of events.
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to provide further information, Councillor Austin kind of hit the nail on the head. A lot of this all of it actually is through the economic development operating budget, which goes through the Economic Development Working Committee, who put the plan together, and a lot of this is actually offset by some of the funding that we get from the county. So.
Okay, any other questions on that? Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French. And I guess I need clarification on a motion that was carried that it was to my understanding that the funding for town halls was removed from the budget, but what I'm reading here is that is not the case.
No, is the town halls come out of, no, I don't think it comes out of this budget. It came out of the council budget.
So at our first session, when we dealt with that, I thought that there was, and this is just my understanding, so I thought that there was a motion that council was removing because we were saying it's an election year and it shouldn't happen. I thought that, sorry, I know that this planning has nothing to do with that. That's on the table. But the motion that Clerk Chaperon has just brought forward is different than what I understood it to be. It just says that it gets moved. I thought that the funding for town hall was removed entirely from the budget.
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To provide some clarity, my understanding is that the discussion that ensued on last Wednesday regarding council's budget talked about the town hall, and staff was to go back and provide further information to members of council so that when you further deliberate later this week, you can make a determination as to whether amendment is appropriate. But no resolution, I believe, was made at that time. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Allen, we're still working on providing that information to members of council.
Okay, any other questions on, so basically we're receiving this, so I need a mover and a seconder. Hannah and McConkey. That the 2018 draft budget planning and bylaw services section be received. All those in favor? Carried. And we'll probably go a little past 10, because I know scheduled to at least 10:15, but we do need a resolution to go past 10. Okay, Austin and Coghlan. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, Mr. Chen, carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through your worship to council, we're going to be going back to tab 5. This is the Fire and Emergency Services Departmental Budget. The Fire and Emergency Services 2018 departmental budget is proposed to be $1,493,457. That is an increase of $157,000 and $157,646, or about $4.96 per $100,000 in residential assessment. The drivers of this increase of $157,646 are mainly due to increases in salary and benefit pressures, increases in vehicle repairs, and increases in general operations such as uniform allowance to meet the needs of firefighters and officers. There is a program change, and that will be for staffing on long weekends, and that's estimated to be an additional $34,295 impact. Through your worship, I defer to the Director of Fire and Emergency Services to speak about the major initiatives for the upcoming year.
So Director Gavay, speak slowly to us and loudly, because it's getting late in the evening and we don't want to miss one of those succinct kind of messages that you might have for us. Mr. Gavay.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council for allowing us to present the budget this evening in conjunction with my colleagues from Finance. So the major initiatives in 2018 are to continue on with the proposed renovation and addition for Station 2 and Public Works Yard 1, which we anticipate to be going out to tender hopefully within the next 7 days. To continue to work with Council on finding a permanent home and a vision for a permanent station for the firefighters in Midhurst. To continue to recruit and retain paid-on-call firefighters, of which we recruit on average 10 every year, and we lose a similar number every year due to factors such as moving employment, changes in family status, and I guess some members, like myself, are not as young as they used to be and take more time to recover than they would perhaps prefer, so choose to give it up to younger people. Also to continue to review and implement recommendations with the Master Fire Plan Committee. We have some capital items which I guess we'd probably be discussing on Wednesday. Those would be to replace a pickup truck and replace an SUV, both of which overdue in accordance with the Master Fire Plan recommendations. And there'll be a request for a net new training and prevention vehicle, basically to satisfy pressures that have been created by growth within the community. And basically to enable us to respond in an effective fashion, not only to customer issues, but also to respond when many of us are out in different directions throughout the day. Also in the capital plan is a request to renovate the upstairs and some of the downstairs areas of Station 5 in Elmvale. It's not due to have any major work done until 2030 under the high growth model of the long range financial plan. However, we do have a need to renovate the upstairs specifically, particularly if council is to give assent to increase staffing on long weekends to guarantee an appropriate level of service and response time. And just to give council, I'm sure you'll have some more detailed questions, but with the request for long weekend staffing, we saw particularly in this past year as we we recruit more younger firefighters, and for those firefighters that are perhaps a little older, maybe the kids have left the nest, they do have interests outside of their regular day jobs and the fire service. So whether it's taking them away to the cottage or going on vacation, to be perfectly honest with council, it's got to the point that I can no longer guarantee a safe and reliable response on these long weekends. And if the facilities in Minising and Elmvale were equipped suitably, my request would actually be for $82,000 for staffing 24 hours a day. But basically, whereas this is a new initiative, we want to make sure we can A, fill the day shifts, and B, we have to wait to update the facilities to accommodate nighttime staffing also.
Questions of council? Where do I start? Councillor Austin.
The program change about staffing on long weekends, is this being done, or is this a trend among a lot of fire and emergency services? Like, we've heard from the library, you know, a comparison between the library services and our townships. Have you done any similar comparison with this?
Director Givet.
Thank you, Worship, to Councillor Austin. We're not the first to do it. When I brought this subject up with the Simcoe County Fire Chiefs at a recent meeting, I believe it was in September, New Tecumseth actually trialled this project very successfully this year, and I believe they are looking forward to moving into 24 hours in this coming budget. And I do believe, again, without consultation with the Fire Chief in Clearview, that they're also trying something similar this year. But I guess the overarching factor is there's just a lack of staff, or I shouldn't say staff, lack of suppression firefighters that are available on these long weekends, and we need to be able to guarantee enough people on a truck to be able to respond in a timely fashion. And this is the only way I can see that it would be palatable to the taxpayer to do it, short of hiring full-time firefighters for suppression. And just to do that in one station alone to provide 24-hour coverage would be $2.4 million plus benefits. And bear in mind that even with this change, the proposed budget for fire and emergency services is only $1.5 million. So I think this model is a good trial, and certainly represents the best value to the taxpayer.
Follow up.
You indicated that in New Tecumseh, they did it on a trial basis and with a, I think you said something, a high level of success. How did they measure that success?
Director Givet.
I don't have the metrics yet from the chief because the year isn't yet done. However, anecdotal evidence was given that there were a number of structure fires this year during that trial period, and they were able to successfully respond to those with enough firefighters to get started with a working fire attack, purely because they had those firefighters. And though I don't have a statement from the fire chief, nor do I wish to speak for him, I was under the impression that the outcome definitely would not have been the same if they hadn't had this trial in place.
Thank you. Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor French, and I'll be as quick as I can. Chief, thanks for being put over and being agreeable and being here. What's the hourly rate for our fire service currently? Are you allowed to speak to that publicly or not?
Director Givet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate the question from Councillor Hanna. Basically, it depends on their status. So currently, a probationary firefighter or recruit would be making $14 an hour under the proposed Bill 148 hourly wage increase that the province is going to initiate effective January 1. And then it goes up from there. So the probationary green strut that has completed the recruit class is making about $18.50, and I believe the average rate, though I'll have to check with the Director of Finance because he's done the complicated math around benefits, is going to be somewhere around $25 an hour is the average, because we have that recruit firefighter, we have the probationary firefighter, we have a graduated firefighter's rate, then we have captains and district chiefs, all of which make a different rate.
Thank you, sir. And the reason I'm asking the question is I'm not quite sure from your report about the fire service folks. Will they be sitting on the long weekends? Is that the plan at the fire station? Or will they be at home getting a standby on-call rate that's lower than the normal hourly rate?
Director Givet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Hannah. So attached to the programme change green and white form that you have, basically details that on the long weekends in question, 1 officer and 4 firefighters would be attached to the fire stations. So that's a total of 5 at each station, for a total of 10 firefighters on duty for a 10-hour shift. And they would not be at home. They would actually be at the station and they would be working. I'm a little too mercenary at this stage in my career to let them sit there and watch TV. However, they will be doing a lot of the chores that we typically do during the day shift, because again, we also have pressures during the day shift to meet our workload. So we're always robbing Peter to pay Paul.
I appreciate the efficiencies of that. My thinking is that you've got volunteer fire folks that have families, they live in the community, if they got cottages and so on, are they going to stay around on the holiday weekend for $25 an hour, if that's what they're going to be getting? Or would it be better to consider paying them a standby rate, let them be at home with their families as long as they have their pager and they're ready to respond, and we pay them a lesser rate and it accommodates them and we save some money?
Director Gavay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Hannah, it would be hard for me to give you a factual answer without actually consulting the staff first. However, the challenge is, though we don't pay them a standby rate per se, we do pay them for their responses under the existing system. And my fear would be that, in communities such as Elmvale, which has traditionally enjoyed a very, very good response from the firefighters, I can recall occasions this year when only 2 were available. So the intent would be to guarantee the staffing, but we could certainly explore paying them X amount of hours at whatever the rate would be, if that's the desire of council.
Thank you, because I'm aware in other organizations where the people get paid a standby rate to be available, but they have to be prepared to respond. My next question, I see this being really complicated. You got people that are being paid to stand by on the weekend. The fire toning goes out from our tiered response. Other folks respond as well. How are we going to, differentiate between who gets paid, how much they get paid, and who responds? I just see it being kind of complicated. I know you'll figure it out, but the other thing I have to point out, I'm not aware of any problems in the past. We've never been aware, at least I've never been aware of any problems in the past, so this was a surprise to me, and I'll let others speak to that if they have any concerns about it or not. But the other thing I was worried is this leading to an initiative for full-time fire service that we can't afford.
Director Gavay.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councillor Hannah. It should be reasonably easy to track and to ensure who gets paid what, based on who said that they would be around for the long weekend. Typically, when you had other firefighters that would come in outside of that, they would be paid for however many hours that they actually did the work, and those people that were on standby would be paid their 3-hour standby fee plus the hourly rate, unless the direction from council was that the first 3 hours, or whatever the magic number is, would be deducted from the overall call total. Getting to your second point, this is certainly anything but a starting position to get towards full-time. I like the existing model, and I like the fact that most of the time it seems to work pretty well. But both the Deputy Fire Chief and I, before we actually figured out this initiative and what it might involve if it were granted by council, we are at the stage where we don't feel that necessarily we can guarantee enough people on the first due truck to actually provide for effective public safety. We can certainly give it a go, but should something bad happen and we are not able to put enough firefighters on the truck, or we're having to pull firefighters from other stations with the associated travel time, there may be negative consequences, to put it mildly.
My last comment, if you can't find folks that want to give up the holiday weekend to sit at the fire hall, maybe you might want to consider a standby rate and let them be at home with their family on an on-call basis.
Other questions or comments? Councillor McConkey?
I guess my comment too would be is like through the stats and that, again, we never saw any issue or heard any report in that there was staffing issues. So now to ask for this, then the first thing that comes to my mind, we're starting to pay for long weekends. Now will people say, well, if you're going to want me to call out on a weekend, are you going to start, they're going to sort of dig their heels in and maybe want to get paid on the weekends as well. So it could blow into something bigger than what it is right here. And I was wondering if there, instead, if you're really, your issue is that on the long weekends and that, can you not give people an encouragement on the long weekends by just giving them a higher rate of pay for, like, you know how you pay them when they come out, then that rate is just higher if they come out on a weekend, rather than having to pay for them to sit all weekend. It's a pay per call, and make that pay per call higher if it's on a long weekend. Can you do that type of funding?
Director Givet, comments?
First of all would be around the reporting. Thank you, Your Worship. So we have not tracked the status of it, but whereas the Deputy Chief and I are typically around because of wanting to ensure that we have enough people both for supervision and for actual firefighting, we have agreed that effective January 1st we will actually be tracking the system that we use to monitor firefighter availability. So I would imagine for the next budget meeting in 2018 you'll have a year's worth of stats to speak to firefighter availability during the day. However, based on the conversation that we did have, which was extensive, we don't feel that this is an issue throughout the rest of the year. It's particularly acute and specific to these long weekends. As for the higher rate of pay for coming out on a long weekend, again, it's typically the outside activities that firefighters have that take them away. I'm not sure that or paying them a standby fee would work, but again, like this, I guess it's an experiment. But to increase that rate for those that do respond is going to be particularly messy on the administrative end, but it can be done.
Deputy Mayor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor French. Fire Chief Cavey, looking at the expense increases, and I know there are notations on these different ones, but fuel and vehicle expense, base budget increased 33%, general operations increased 24%, training, development, and travel increased 51%, repairs and maintenance increased 35%. I'm sure there's good reasons for all of these. Do you see this as being a certain amount of catch-up with respect to these expenses? The overall expenses increased 13% or $153,000, or do you see that being a trend in the future? While revenue has gone down 10,000, the expenses are going up 153,000.
Director Givet?
Thank you, Worship. So the majority of my peers, we all submit a very detailed Excel spreadsheet to the Director of Finance, who produced the one that you have in front of you. So while I can't speak to exactly what makes up each one, I can tell you that, for instance, vehicle maintenance and repairs, this has been a particularly excessive year. We're probably at six figures by now with that. The revenue has actually caught up. If I can direct you to the actuals up until September 30th, we're actually at a position that is far greater than where we had anticipated to be, despite having written off a large amount of billing that we had done throughout the last 2 or 3 years because it was purely uncollectible. There is a fair amount of catching up to do, to your point, Deputy Mayor, with regards to equipment, and even in minor capital, to be honest, the request from the Deputy Fire Chief was at $140,000 for this year to play catch up. However, it was suggested that due to this being the timing of this budget in relation to trying to keep percentages down for whatever reasons may be from the council side of things, the easiest way to put this is the service has been well supported by council. However, it does not effectively fund us for everything that we have to do in training alone and paying people for the hours that they should be getting. The recruit program has been underfunded by 100 hours per firefighter for a total of 1,000 on average per 1,000 hours per year. However, having recruited 15 firefighters last year, you can call that 1,500 hours. The driver training, specialized training, further education, pump operations, officer development, instructor skills, hazmat training requirements, auto extrication, performance appraisals, coaching and mentoring, emergency management, management hours for district chiefs and captains, public relations and public education. We just continually have to rob one budget to to essentially fund all of those things in order to provide a level of service and to give the firefighters the skills that they're required to have and need to have as they transition into other roles. So basically the budget that you see before you, in consultation with the Deputy Fire Chief Operations and Training and the Fire Prevention Officer, are the hours that we need in order to provide the service that we are currently providing properly without sort of inconsistently funding certain people or certain programs throughout the year, depending on what our monthly scorecard looks like. It's a pretty honest reflection of what we need to operate properly and legally today.
Councilor McConkey?
I have a question on number D. Anticipate a significant increase in uniform allowance for permanent full-time staff and volunteer firefighting staff as per allowance in team member handbook. Why is that now an issue when we always had that team member handbook? Did something get updated in the handbook, or what does the handbook say?
Director Givet?
Thank you, Worship. So if we were to do the math according to the team member handbook, at 100 firefighters, you would be looking at $40,000 per year. I believe the figure that's been submitted is actually $25,000. And basically this speaks to the fact that for whatever reason, and not speaking ill of the previous management, but I have firefighters that don't have winter coats or sweaters or hats. So we're just basically trying to get to a point with a modified figure for this year where we can effectively give them the uniform that they need year round.
Follow up?
Just for council's information, and later on in a staff report, could we understand the type of equipment or something, or the uniform that's required by a firefighter? Like when you say hat, I'm thinking helmet, but I don't know if you mean helmet. So I'd sort of like to understand the basic uniform that we have to keep them up to date with and the costs associated to it.
So, Director Givet?
Thank you, Worship. I'm just going to find the piece of paperwork that I need to answer that question. Okay, so basically all that a firefighter has been guaranteed, certainly for the last couple of years, is a shirt and a pair of pants, and then whatever uniform regalia, whether it's firefighter epaulets and the crests. So typically the uniform allowance, if paid in accordance with the team member handbook, would be $400, but all we've been spending is about $125. Then out of the money that they do get, because we don't fund the things that we said we would within the team member handbook, they've basically been taking out of their wages money to buy sweaters if they can afford to do so, or jackets. But what they should in fact be issued with is not less than one pair of pants, 2 t-shirts, 1 job shirt, 1 3 to 4 season jacket, 1 sweater, or 1 toque. Things such as helmets would be taken care of in their turnout gear allowance, and there's been no requested increase for that this year because they do get the personal protective equipment that they need.
CEO Brindley, you wanted to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The team member handbook has not changed, but how it's being implemented is changing. You have to remember too, until this council essentially, primarily we were mandated a percentage increase, and our former fire chief would increase the budget by 2% or 1.5 or whatever it is. And I think what you're seeing here is a significant amount of catch-up because, our firefighters weren't given the allowance that they probably should have, but at the same time, we were trying to stick to a percentage budget. And that's what the previous fire chief would have done at that time is if there was 2%, he did 2%. If it was 1.5 or whatever, that's what he did.
Councilor McConkey?
Do you feel that this new clothing allowance or the increasing this will help with with retention?
Director Givet?
Thank you, Your Worship. That's an interesting question. I don't think it would hurt, in as much as I think the firefighters would probably feel, not that I speak for them, having not heard their concerns on the matter, other than their frustrations at not getting what they need. I think it would probably make them a little happier, and therefore would probably impact retention.
Okay. I guess kind of the only comment I have is the standby fee, I don't have a problem with it, because one of the things that is happening in Springwater, our population is growing, but unfortunately, a lot of them are commuting and that, and I would suggest we probably haven't had a real uptick, significant amount of volunteers from the new 660 homes that are going to be in Center Vespra. I'm not sure if we have any. And the good old boys, unfortunately, they came from all the farms and the local factories and that. Some of them are getting long in the tooth. And they're not going to be replaced by the gung-ho, unless it's some young guy that wants to become a professional firefighter. He may make the commitment. But I do think we have a population and demographic shift that, because let's face it, there's less people on the farms, and a good amount of the volunteers were off farms. I know that, and local industry. And I think the reality is, and we know as we grow at some point, we will have more full-time firefighters. But if we can delay it by doing things like this and still provide the response that we need to provide, because I know I heard stories of not being able to respond from even, in the last year or so, from certain fire halls, trying to get people there, they just couldn't. So they had to respond from another fire hall, and that could be a problem. I guess it hasn't created any kind of disaster for us, but I don't like the idea of spending money. But the one comment that I did hear, this, paid 3 hours or whatever, or sorry, how is this going to work when they're basically at the fire hall? So they're going to be there for how many hours that we're paying them? Maybe just go through that again, because I think I missed something.
Thank you, Worship. So under the proposed staffing change, it was proposed that they would be there at the fire station for 10 hours, which represents the day shift in this particular year. So basically they would be working, with the exception of the part where they have a half hour for lunch and then 2 15-minute breaks during the day. And they would be accomplishing tasks that normally encroach on the day staff's abilities, or we have to pay people extra hours outside of our normal operations to get them done if we're unable to do them also. So basically they're going to be working and effective the whole time that they're there.
But just for clarity, because I thought I heard something else, so if they went out on a call, in that 10 hours, we're not paying them more, are we?
No, Your Worship, that would be included in the 10 hours. The only time you'd pay them any additional funds is if it ran past the start and finish times of the day that they were scheduled for.
Okay, for some reason I misunderstood. I thought there was some hours on top of other hours, because I thought there was some comment about, and maybe, yes, maybe you can clarify that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if I recall correctly, Councillor Hanna had made a suggestion that we could pay firefighters a standby fee of however many hours that may be. I think I threw a number out there of 3, and really there would have to be some direction as to whether if there was a call and those firefighters that were being paid that 3-hour fee, for instance, responded, that they would either be paid an hourly rate in addition to the standby fee, where they were paid to stand by in the community, or it would be deducted from that 3 hours.
Okay, that's part, okay. Yeah, because I think obviously whatever we do, we want a net cost per hour and not on top of each other. Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor French. And just through you, just for clarification or for my own understanding, you said that the original ask before was 143,000, like, just a round number, if in my head, if that's what it is. I'm just curious what we're not doing, or what's not being proposed to council.
Director Gavay.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may just ask a quick question to Councillor Coghlan, just to make sure that I understand the question. Are you referring to when I mentioned the programme change and said that ideally if the facilities were renovated and suitable for 24-hour shifts, the number would be far greater?
No, sorry. During the conversation, I believe it was with Councillor Austin, you had said that Deputy French brought forward to you a number, and I thought I heard 140 something, so I was just trying to confirm, so I didn't leave here thinking that.
Director Gavay.
I don't recall the specific.
Yeah, I think it was the additional hours, I think, of the way we kind of went through that, which was cut back. Our Director Schmidt, do you have a comment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Gavet. I believe the question from Councillor Coghlan surrounded the minor capital discussion that we had, whereby the original was in around the 140, and it was reduced to the number that we see this evening. I believe that's done.
So yes, maybe you can comment on the minor capital.
My thanks, Your Worship, to my colleague Director Schmidt and to Councillor Coghlan, and for Council for bearing with me whilst I was being reminded. So yes, the minor capital budget request from Deputy Fire Chief French was $140,000 for this year, and through consultation with senior staff and the Director of Finance prior to the budget sessions, it was agreed that the best way forward, given the restraints that Council would face in this budget year, would be to halve that number and to push the other $70,000 through to 2019's budget.
Thank you.
Actually, as a follow-up to Councillor Coghlan, so if we carved it in half, what did we move to next year out of the wish list for this year? Because we must have moved something.
Again, just to make sure I understand the question, of what was already cut in half by the department before it came to Council, or if you were to carve the half that we submitted?
No, basically you cut it in half by the time it came to council. And so obviously you must have shifted half of it somewhere. And, but what pieces comprise that half?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased to have the paperwork from Deputy French to be able to answer that question. There was some extrication equipment for the heavy extrication capability out of Elmville, and $6,700, and $9,000 for dryers to dry turnout gear, $7,500 for off-road rescue equipment. We also have additional small extinguishing equipment for the fleet. And there is some fit testing equipment, I believe, in the amount of $35,000, and some other miscellaneous. And just to recap Deputy Fire Chief's words to me, this was his needs list as opposed to a wish list from him. Otherwise, the number would have been greater still.
Okay. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to Chief Gavet. We had a report to council earlier in the year, or it might have been during our session, but the cost of sending the laundry out versus doing it in-house. So the dryers, we're not getting them, so we're not moving to doing it in-house anymore?
Director Gavet?
Thank you, Your Worship. So basically, we did actually buy 2 dryers and a washing machine since I've been here. So we are actually doing the majority of it in-house. Deputy Chief French advised me that he requires 2 more dryers, not necessarily for the laundry aspect where there are no washers in, there's only 2 washers out of 4 stations, but to get the turnout gear dry after fighting fires, should it not actually need cleaning in-house. So the intent is to add 2, and that way there is 1 dryer in every station, and whether it's for laundry purposes or whether it's just to dry gear that is wet but not dirty requiring laundry, that would enable him to meet the needs of his firefighters.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I have a resolution. I need a mover and a seconder. Oh, Hannah and Coghlan. That the 2018 draft budget fire and emergency services section be received. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none? Carried. So I need to recess. I need a mover and a seconder. Austin, Ritchie. Recess to Wednesday at 3 o'clock. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for everybody's input.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council.